My name is Jasmine Thompson, but everyone calls me Jazz. I'm 30 years old, and until a year ago, my life was painfully ordinary, the kind of ordinary that slowly wears you down without you even noticing. I worked as an accountant at a small consulting firm in Denver, where 60-hour work weeks weren't unusual, and appreciation was practically non-existent. My apartment was a modest one-bedroom on the outskirts of the city. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every morning, my alarm rang at 6 a.m., and the first thought that entered my mind was usually a calculation. Bills, rent, groceries, student loans. I had become so used to doing mental math about money that sometimes I caught myself calculating the cost of breathing. My car was a 10-year-old Honda that made a disturbing rattling noise every time it rained. Mechanics had looked at it twice, and both times told me the same thing. Honestly, it's cheaper to ignore the noise. So I ignored it. Like, I ignored a lot of things. My boss, Kenneth, had a habit of taking credit for my ideas during client meetings. My coworker, Brandon, left early most afternoons, leaving me to finish projects that technically belonged to both of us. Yet somehow, when promotions were discussed, Brandon's name always floated to the top of the list. Still, I kept my head down and worked, because that's what responsible adults did. At least, that's what I told myself. My personal life wasn't much more glamorous. My boyfriend, Ethan Carter, was a freelance graphic designer. He was kind, funny, and unbelievably patient with my stress. But freelancing meant unpredictable income, which meant our dates often consisted of takeout pizza and Netflix instead of fancy restaurants. One evening, a few weeks before my birthday, we were sitting on my tiny balcony watching the Denver skyline glow in the distance. I remember Ethan joking as he sipped his beer. "You know," he said, "if you ever win the lottery, promise me something." I laughed. "What?" "Don't tell your family." I raised an eyebrow. "That specific?" He shrugged. "I've seen how they treat you." His tone wasn't cruel, just honest. And unfortunately, accurate. My family situation was complicated. My parents, Gerald and Patricia Thompson, divorced when I was 14. Within 2 years, they had both remarried. My father married Elviana, a real estate agent who had expensive taste and an even more expensive attitude. My mother married Jude, a successful contractor who believed every dollar should be guarded like national treasure. Then there were my siblings. My younger sister Kelsey, 27, was what our family lovingly referred to as the golden child. She graduated from Stanford, married a cardiologist named Andrew, and now lived in a beautiful suburban house with 2 perfect children and a driveway that contained more luxury vehicles than my entire apartment building. Then there was my older brother, Lucas, 34. Lucas was charming. Lucas was intelligent. Lucas was also incapable of holding a job for more than 6 months. Borrowing money from relatives had practically become his profession, and I had been one of his most loyal investors. 3 years earlier, he called me crying, saying he needed $5,000 for rehab. I emptied my savings account without hesitation. Months later, I learned he had never actually gone. Then there was extended family. My Aunt Priska, my mother's younger sister, was probably the only genuinely kind person in our entire family circle. She was an elementary school teacher who lived paycheck to paycheck. Her car was an ancient Toyota Camry that sounded like it might explode every time she started it, but she had the biggest heart I had ever known. In contrast, my father's sister Vanessa had married into money and spent most holidays critiquing everyone else's life choices. Her son Levi had inherited her entitlement, but none of her financial success, and unfortunately, her drinking habits. Through all of this, one person had always been steady in my life. My best friend, Morgan. We met in college and had survived everything from terrible roommates to heartbreaks together. Morgan worked as a nurse and understood struggle better than most people. She also understood my complicated relationship with my family. "You're too generous with them," she told me once. "They're your family," I said. "That doesn't mean they're entitled to you." Still, I kept helping because somewhere deep down, I believed that if I just gave enough, eventually they would love me the way I wanted to be loved. Buying lottery tickets was my one small act of rebellion. Every Friday, I stopped at Murphy's Corner Market and spent $10 on tickets. My family loved to tease me about it. My mother called it a tax on people who don't understand probability. Lucas joked that I should just give the money to him directly. My father gave lectures about statistics, but I kept buying them because those tickets represented something tiny but powerful. Hope. The ticket that changed everything happened on a Tuesday, my 30th birthday. Work had been brutal that week. Kenneth had once again presented my financial strategy to a major client as if it had been his idea. By the time I left the office, I felt drained. I stopped at Murphy's store out of habit. "Happy birthday, Jazz," Murphy said as I walked in. Murphy had owned the store for over 30 years. He knew every regular customer by name. "Thanks," I said. "The usual, and maybe one extra today." I handed him $20 instead of my usual 10. "Birthday luck," he said with a grin. Instead of using the quick pick option like usual, I chose my own numbers. My birthday, my parents' birthdays, my Aunt Priska's birthday, and Morgan's birthday. Numbers connected to the people who had shaped my life. That night, I ordered Italian takeout, opened a bottle of wine Morgan had given me, and settled into a quiet evening alone. The lottery drawing was at 8 p.m. I barely paid attention. Around 8:30, I remembered the tickets. I checked the numbers on my phone. The first number matched, then the second, then the third. My heart started beating faster. Fourth number, fifth. By the time the sixth number appeared, my hands were shaking. I stared at my phone. Then I checked again, then again. Finally, I turned on the television and rewound the drawing. Each number appeared exactly the same. I dropped the remote. "No way," I whispered to my empty apartment. According to the lottery website, I had just won $42 million. And in that moment, I had absolutely no idea that the money itself would turn out to be the least shocking part of what was about to happen. I did not sleep that night. Not even for a minute. I sat curled up at the edge of my couch with the ticket in both hands, like it might vanish if I set it down too long. The takeout container sat open on the coffee table, forgotten. The wine had gone warm. Outside my apartment window, the parking lot lamps cast pale yellow light across the cracked pavement, and every ordinary detail of that place felt surreal now. $42 million. Even thinking the number felt absurd. After taxes, the lottery website estimated it would be somewhere around 28 million. A number so large it didn't feel like money anymore. It felt like distance, freedom, escape. Like every anxiety that had quietly stalked me for years had suddenly been given a door and told to leave. And yet, under that rush of disbelief, something darker kept rising. Fear. I started searching online just after midnight. At first, I was looking for practical information. How to claim the prize, how long I had, whether I needed to sign the ticket right away. But one article led to another, and within an hour, I had gone from stunned winner to terrified secret keeper. There were stories everywhere. Lottery winners whose names became public and who were suddenly surrounded by strangers asking for loans, investments, miracle cures, second chances. Families torn apart by greed. Siblings suing siblings. Parents demanding houses. Friends reappearing with tragic stories and open hands. One man had said winning the lottery was the fastest way to find out who really loved you. Another article said it was the fastest way to lose everyone. By 3 a.m, I was still in my pajamas, sitting cross-legged on the floor with my laptop open and my pulse refusing to slow down. Around 4, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Happy birthday, midnight girl. Still awake?" I stared at the message for a long moment. My fingers hovered above the screen. For one reckless second, I almost typed it. I won. Just those 2 words. But I didn't. Instead, I wrote back, "Yeah, can't sleep. Rough brain night." His reply came almost instantly. "Want me to come over?" Tears pricked my eyes for no clear reason. Maybe because he meant it. Maybe because if he came over, I wasn't sure I could keep the secret from spilling out of me. "Not tonight," I typed. "I'm okay." Another pause. Then, "You don't always have to be okay alone, Jazz." That message sat on my screen long after the phone dimmed. By sunrise, I had made my first real decision. I would claim the money, and I would tell no one. Not my mother, not my father, not Kelsey or Lucas, not Ethan, not even Morgan. At least, not yet. By 8:30 that morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Kenneth sounded annoyed, which almost made me laugh. Somewhere in the city, a man who had stolen credit for half my ideas was irritated that I was missing 1 day of labor, while I was sitting at my kitchen table with a winning lottery ticket worth more money than he would probably see in 3 lifetimes. At 10, I was sitting in the waiting room of a law office downtown. The attorney's name was Daniel Richardson, and according to 3 separate recommendations online, he specialized in estate law, asset protection, and financial privacy. His office was on the 22nd floor of a glass building that made me feel underdressed the second I stepped inside. I kept my purse zipped and clutched on my lap. The ticket was inside. When Daniel finally came out to greet me, he looked exactly like the kind of man people trusted with terrifying amounts of money. Mid-50s, silver at the temples, expensive glasses, calm eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Thompson?" I stood. "Yes." He led me into his office, and after we sat down, I placed the ticket carefully on his desk. "I need to know," I said, hearing the tremor in my own voice, "how to claim this without anyone finding out it was me." His eyebrows lifted for the briefest moment, then his expression settled into polished professionalism. "I see," he said quietly. "You came to the right place." For the next 2 hours, Daniel walked me through every option. In our state, lottery winners could claim prizes through legal structures that protected privacy: a blind trust, an intermediary filing, layered asset protection, tax strategy, security precautions. He explained it all in a measured voice while I took notes that barely looked legible because my hand kept shaking. "The biggest mistake winners make," he said, folding his hands on the desk, "is emotional urgency. They tell people before they have a plan. Once that happens, it's almost impossible to regain control." I nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." Daniel studied me a moment. "Do you trust your family?" The question hit harder than I expected. I looked away, toward the window. Denver stretched below us in hard winter light. Clean lines, moving cars, tiny distant people going about their lives. "I think," I said carefully, "that some of them love me." He waited. "But I don't know if they would still see me clearly after this." That was the first fully honest sentence I had spoken since checking the ticket. Daniel nodded once. Then we proceed quietly. Over the next 2 weeks, my life became a strange double existence. On paper, enormous things were happening. Daniel helped me set up the trust. I met with financial advisors whose suits probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. We built an investment structure that would outlive me if handled correctly. Bonds, diversified funds, liquidity planning, charitable channels, tax reserve accounts. I signed documents until my fingers cramped. And then one afternoon, it was done. The money was real. Not theoretical, not numbers on a website. Real. Sitting in protected accounts under structures designed to keep me anonymous and safe. Enough to make sure I never had to worry about rent again, or student loans, or surprise medical bills, or whether buying salmon instead of ground turkey would wreck my grocery budget for the week. Enough to leave my job tomorrow. Enough to change everything. But on the outside, nothing changed at all. I still drove my rattling Honda to work. Still listened to Brandon brag about doing half the work he actually did. Still smiled tightly when Kenneth presented one of my reports to a client, like it had come from his brilliant strategic mind. I still texted Ethan about dinner plans and told Morgan about an annoying patient story she'd heard 100 variations of in nursing. And every single day, the secret got heavier. One Friday night, Ethan and I were eating noodles from takeout boxes in my apartment when he noticed I'd gone quiet. "You've been somewhere else for like 2 weeks, he said. I blinked. "What?" He leaned back, studying me. That look. The one where your body's here, but your brain is filing taxes in another dimension. Despite myself, I smiled faintly. Maybe I'm just tired. Jazz. He said my name gently, but there was concern in it. I looked down at the box in my lap. Part of me wanted to tell him everything right then. To say I wasn't tired, I was terrified. That my life had split open on my birthday, and I had been walking around acting normal ever since. Instead, I said, I've just been thinking about money. Ethan laughed softly. That is the least surprising sentence you've ever said. Then his smile faded a little. Did something happen? I hesitated too long. His face changed. Not suspicious. Just hurt. You know, he said quietly, you can tell me when things are bad. I'm not just here for the easy versions of you. The words lodged somewhere deep in my chest. That night, after he left, I stood in my bathroom staring at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked the same. Same tired eyes, same loose sleep shirt, same woman who had spent years trying to be useful enough to deserve love. But now there was something else behind my face. A question. If people knew what I had, would they still love me the same way? Or had they ever? The thought followed me into bed and stayed there long after the lights were out. And slowly, dangerously, an idea began to form. What if I could find out before telling them? What if I could test them first? Not with wealth, with need. By the time morning came, the idea had taken shape so completely, it no longer felt like a thought. It felt like a plan. The idea should have scared me more than it did. Lying to the people closest to me, testing their loyalty like some kind of psychological experiment, wasn't the sort of thing I normally did. I had always been the peacemaker in my family, the dependable one, the person who tried to smooth things over when conflicts appeared. But something about the secret sitting in my bank accounts had changed the way I saw everything. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of losing them. And that made me wonder something uncomfortable. If I had nothing left to give them, would they still show up for me? The thought followed me all weekend. By Monday morning, I had decided I needed to talk to someone before doing anything stupid. That someone was Morgan. We met after her shift at a small diner we both loved near the hospital. The place smelled like coffee and bacon grease, and the vinyl booths squeaked whenever someone shifted their weight. Morgan slid into the seat across from me, tying her hair into a loose bun. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she said. "That obvious?" "Jazz," she said dryly. "You're holding a coffee mug like it owes you money." I exhaled slowly. "There's something I've been thinking about." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Okay." I hesitated. I still wasn't ready to tell her about the lottery, but I needed advice about the idea forming in my head. "I've been wondering something about my family," I said carefully. Morgan didn't interrupt. "What would happen," I continued, "if I was the one who needed help for once?" She leaned back slightly. "You mean financially?" I nodded. Morgan's expression softened. "You've helped them a lot over the years." "That's one way to put it." I stirred my coffee even though I hadn't added sugar. "I'm thinking about testing something." Now she frowned. "What kind of test?" I took a deep breath. "I'm going to tell them I lost my job." Morgan blinked. "You what?" "I'll say the consulting firm shut down suddenly. Something believable. Maybe financial fraud or mismanagement. And I'll say I need $5,000 to cover rent and medical expenses while I find a new job." Morgan stared at me. "You're serious?" I nodded slowly. "I want to see who helps." Silence stretched across the table. Finally, she leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Jazz, that's manipulative." "I know. You're planning to lie to everyone in your family just to measure their generosity." I didn't argue, because that was exactly what I was doing. "I'm not trying to trick them," I said quietly. "I just want to know who would actually be there for me." Morgan folded her arms. "You already know the answer." "Do I?" "Yes." She counted on her fingers. "Kelsey will say the kids are expensive." "Probably." "Lucas will say he's broke." "Definitely." "Your dad will lecture you about responsibility without offering a dollar." "And Jude will remind me I'm not his daughter." Morgan sighed. "Exactly. So what's the point?" I looked down at the table. "The point is, I need to know for sure." She studied me for a long moment. "Why now?" The question hit closer to the truth than she realized, because now I had something enormous to protect. But I couldn't say that. Instead, I shrugged. Because I'm tired of wondering. Morgan's eyes softened. Jazz, you're going to hurt yourself doing this. Maybe. But if I'm wrong, if someone surprises me, I want to know that too. She shook her head slowly. You've already decided. I nodded. I have. Morgan leaned back with a long sigh. Well, she said finally, if you're going to do this, at least do it right. I blinked. You're helping? I'm helping you not get caught in a stupid lie. A reluctant smile tugged at my mouth. That's fair. For the next hour, we built the story together. It had to be believable. Not dramatic enough to trigger panic, but serious enough that asking for help made sense. We settled on this. My consulting firm had suddenly shut down after losing its biggest clients. The CEO had been accused of financial misconduct. The company froze operations while investigators sorted everything out. Employees were left without paychecks. Morgan tapped the table thoughtfully. They'll ask about unemployment. I'll say it takes weeks to process. Good. And interviews? I've applied everywhere, I said. Some callbacks. Nothing definite yet. Morgan nodded slowly. What about the medical expenses? I paused. I'll say I had some tests recently. What kind of tests? I shrugged. Something vague. Morgan frowned. Careful with that. People will worry. That's kind of the point. She sighed again. Jazz. But she didn't argue further. By the time we finished, I had a complete script. The same story for every person. The same request. $5,000. Not a fortune. But enough to matter. That night, I sat on my couch with a notebook open on my lap. At the top of the page, I wrote, Experiment. Underneath it, I listed the names. Mom, Patricia. Jude. Dad, Gerald. Elviana. Kelsey. Andrew. Lucas. Aunt Vanessa. Cousin Levi. Aunt Prisca. 10 people. 10 opportunities to prove that family meant something beyond convenience. Then I wrote predictions next to each name. Mom would probably offer sympathy, but pass responsibility to someone else. Jude would refuse outright. Dad would lecture me. Elviana would be dismissive. Kelsey would claim the kids were expensive. Andrew would stay quiet. Lucas would say he had no money. Vanessa would criticize my career. Levi would promise help and disappear. That left one person. Prisca. I stared at her name longer than the others. If anyone would help, it was her. But even with Prisca, I kept my expectations low. $5,000 was a lot of money for a public school teacher living alone. I closed the notebook and leaned back on the couch. My heart was beating faster now, because the moment I made the first call, there would be no turning back. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my phone in my hand. My palms were sweating. The name at the top of the list was obvious. Mom. Patricia Thompson had always liked to describe herself as a nurturing parent. She loved telling stories about the sacrifices she made raising us. If anyone in the family would help, it should be her. I dialed the number. The phone rang 3 times. Then she answered. Hi, honey, she said distractedly. Everything okay? I swallowed. Hi, Mom. My voice sounded strained. Good. That was part of the script. Jazz, she said. You sound upset. I took a breath. Then I began telling the story. About the company closing, the lost paychecks, the sudden financial panic. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing change on the other end of the line. Concern. At least at first. When I finished, there was a pause. Oh, honey, she said softly. That's terrible. I closed my eyes. Here it comes. I hate to ask this, I said quietly, but I need help. Another pause. How much? About $5,000. Silence filled the line. Long enough that I started to hear the faint hum of the connection. Finally, she spoke again. Well, Jude and I just put a down payment on the lake house. Her voice had shifted. Less concern, more explanation. We're a little cash poor right now. I said nothing. Have you tried asking your father? She continued quickly. Or Kelsey? Andrew makes good money. I stared at the wall in front of me. The experiment had officially begun, and already I had my first answer. I didn't hang up immediately after my mother finished speaking. For a moment, I just sat there, the phone pressed against my ear, listening to the faint background noise on her end of the line. A television murmured somewhere in the distance. Jude's voice drifted past briefly, saying something I couldn't quite make out. My mother cleared her throat. "Well," she said, her tone carefully sympathetic, "let me talk to Jude and see what we can do." I knew that sentence. In our family, it meant no. But saying no directly would make her feel like a bad mother. So she wrapped the refusal in polite uncertainty instead. "I understand," I said quietly. "You know Jude," she continued, already defensive. "He's very careful about money." "Yes, he was careful when it came to my problems." "Of course," I said. "I'll call you back after we talk," she promised. We both knew she wouldn't. "Thanks, Mom." "Everything will work out, Jazz," she added quickly. "Maybe this is a sign you should look for something more stable. That consulting firm always sounded risky." I murmured something polite and ended the call. Then I opened the notebook lying beside me on the kitchen table. Under Mom, Patricia, I wrote, "Concerned but deflected responsibility. Suggested asking others. No mention of actually helping." I closed the notebook and rubbed my temples. 1 down, 9 to go. My father was next. Calling him always felt a little like scheduling an appointment with a lecturer. Gerald Thompson had spent 30 years teaching high school chemistry, and he treated most conversations the way he treated a classroom. Instruction first, empathy later. Sometimes never. He answered on the second ring. "Jazz, what's going on?" I repeated the story. The company collapse, the unpaid wages, the medical tests that had drained my emergency fund. He listened quietly until I finished. Then he sighed. "You know," he began, "this is exactly why I've always told you to build stronger financial reserves." I closed my eyes. Here it was. "I had savings," I said calmly. "But the medical tests." "Still," he continued, ignoring the interruption, "this is an important lesson. Life has a way of humbling us when we don't prepare properly." A lecture. Exactly as predicted. "Dad," I said gently, steering the conversation back, "I was hoping you might be able to help, just temporarily. $5,000 to cover rent until unemployment starts." There was a pause. Then he cleared his throat. "Well, Elviana and I just finished remodeling the kitchen." I waited. "And property taxes are coming up next quarter." Another pause. "Have you asked your mother?" The irony of that question almost made me laugh. "I thought I'd talk to you first." He hesitated. Then his voice softened slightly. "I'm sure you'll figure something out, Jazz. You've always been resourceful." Resourceful. Translation? You're on your own. After we hung up, I opened the notebook again. Under Dad, Gerald, I wrote, 20-minute lecture about financial responsibility. No help offered. I stared at the page for a moment longer than necessary. Then I flipped to the next name. Calling Kelsey was strangely harder. Maybe because part of me still wanted my little sister to prove me wrong. She answered with the cheerful chaos of children screaming somewhere in the background. "Jazz, hey, what's up?" I explained the situation. Her reaction was immediate. "Oh my God, that's awful." Relief flickered through me. For a moment, she sounded genuinely concerned. "That must be so stressful," she continued. "Are you okay?" "I'm managing," I said, "but I could really use some help right now." "How much?" $5,000. The concern in her voice hesitated, then wavered. "Well," she said slowly. Andrew's voice murmured something behind her. "We just bought the new BMW last month," she said, "and the kids' tuition was due this week." Of course it was. "And we're redoing the master bathroom," she added. I pictured the house. The marble countertops, the designer light fixtures she'd posted on Instagram last month. "But let me talk to Andrew," she said quickly. "I'll see what we can do." Her tone was apologetic, but I could hear the distance already forming. "That's okay," I said. "I understand." When the call ended, I wrote in the notebook, Kelsey, sympathetic but expensive lifestyle excuses. 3 calls, 3 disappointments. Lucas didn't answer his phone. That didn't surprise me. Instead, I sent him a long text explaining the situation. 15 minutes later, he replied, "That sucks, sis." tight right now myself. That was it. No follow-up. No offer to help. Considering I had once given him $5,000 without hesitation, the message felt like a slap. I wrote, Lucas claimed he's broke. No concern. The conversation with Elviana was short, painfully short. After hearing the story, she said coolly, Jasmine, I'm sure this situation is very stressful for you. Her voice carried the polished sympathy of someone delivering bad news at a customer service desk. But your father and I are not in a position to help financially right now. I hadn't even asked yet. Perhaps this will be an opportunity for you to learn stronger financial discipline. Click. She hung up. Under her name, I wrote, immediate refusal. Suggested financial discipline. Jude was worse. He didn't even bother pretending. You're not my daughter, he said flatly after hearing the request. I've supported your mother for years. Your financial problems are your responsibility. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. I stared at the phone afterward, then wrote, Jude, blunt refusal. Cousin Levi actually seemed promising at first. When I called, he sounded genuinely sympathetic. That's rough, Jazz, he said. $5,000 isn't small, but I can probably help. Relief flickered through me again. Really? Yeah, let's grab lunch tomorrow. I'll bring a check. But the next day, an hour before we were supposed to meet, he texted. Something came up. Rain check? I replied. He never answered. I wrote, Levi promised help. Disappeared. The final call that day was Aunt Vanessa. Predictably, she turned the entire conversation into a critique of my life. Well, Jasmine, she said, I always thought that consulting firm sounded unstable. I said nothing. You should have taken that job at the bank after college. I told your father that at the time. Yes, you did, I said. And now look, she continued. These situations are exactly why people should make smarter career decisions. When I mentioned the $5,000, she made a small scoffing sound. Honestly, Jasmine, people these days are far too comfortable asking relatives for money. The irony nearly choked me. Families used to solve their own problems. I ended the call before she could finish the lecture. Notebook entry. Vanessa, criticism. No help. By the end of the week, I had pages of notes. Every response, every excuse, every moment of deflection. 7 people, 7 disappointments. The emotional exhaustion hit me Friday night. I sat alone in my apartment staring at the notebook. The evidence was undeniable. The people I had helped repeatedly over the years couldn't or wouldn't do the same for me. My chest felt hollow. Not surprised, but still hurt. I closed the notebook and leaned back against the couch cushions. Maybe Morgan had been right. Maybe the experiment was pointless, because it hadn't revealed anything new. It had only confirmed what I already suspected. I was just about to put the notebook away when my phone rang. The name on the screen made me pause. Aunt Prisca. I hadn't even called her yet. Apparently, someone in the family had already told her about my situation. I answered. Hi, Aunt Prisca. Her voice came through warm and gentle. Jazz, sweetheart, I heard about your job. Something tightened in my chest. I'm so sorry, she said. Are you okay? For the first time all week. The concern sounded real, and suddenly, I wasn't sure I was ready for what she might say next. I'm hanging in there, I said quietly. But the moment the words left my mouth, I realized something strange. For the first time all week, the emotion in my voice wasn't part of the act. It was real. Your mother told me what happened, Aunt Prisca said gently, about the company closing. Of course she had. In our family, bad news traveled faster than compassion. I'm okay, I said again, though the words felt thinner now. Listen, she said, can we meet tomorrow? Lunch, maybe? I hesitated. This hadn't been part of the plan yet. I was actually planning to call you tomorrow, I admitted. She chuckled softly. Well, then I saved you the trouble. Where should we meet? How about that diner near my apartment, the one with the blueberry pancakes you love? I smiled, despite myself. Deal. The next day, the sky over Denver was pale and cloudy. I arrived at the diner a few minutes early and sat in a booth near the window. The place looked exactly the same as it always had. Red vinyl booths, chipped coffee mugs, a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked in years. A few minutes later, Aunt Prisca walked in. She looked exactly like she always did. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail, and she wore a faded cardigan with mismatched buttons over a pair of jeans. But when she spotted me, her face lit up with that same warm smile she'd had my entire life. "Jazz!" She pulled me into a hug before even sitting down. "I'm so sorry about the job," she said, squeezing my shoulders. "That company never deserved you anyway." Her voice carried such immediate, sincere anger on my behalf that my throat tightened. We ordered lunch, sandwiches and coffee, and for the next 20 minutes, she asked thoughtful questions about my supposed job search. Not interrogating, just listening. "Have you updated your resume?" she asked. "Yes." "And interviews?" "A few possibilities." "Well," she said firmly, "any company would be lucky to have you." I stared at the table. How had she managed to sound more supportive in 15 minutes than the rest of my family combined? When the waitress cleared our plates, Prisca reached slowly into her purse. At first, I thought she was looking for her wallet. Instead, she pulled out a small white envelope. Then she slid it across the table toward me. "I want you to take this," she said. I frowned. "What is it?" $3,000. For a moment, I didn't understand the words. Then my eyes snapped up to her face. "Prisca, what?" "It's not the full $5,000 you mentioned," she said apologetically. "But it should cover your rent at least." The envelope sat on the table between us, like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "I can't take this," I said quickly. "Yes, you can." "No," I insisted. "This is too much." She waved a hand dismissively. "Nonsense! Prisca, that's a lot of money." She leaned forward slightly. "Family helps family." The words hit me harder than anything anyone else had said all week, because she meant them. No hesitation, no excuses. Just a simple belief. Family helps family. "But what about you?" I asked quietly. "I'll be fine." "You live on a teacher's salary." "I manage." "Prisca." "Jazz." Her tone was firm but kind. "I'm not lending you this money because I have plenty of it." She tapped the envelope lightly. "I'm lending it because you need it." My vision blurred. This wasn't supposed to happen. I had expected sympathy from her, maybe even an offer to help find a job, but not this. "Listen," she continued gently, "if things get tight for a while, my sofa pulls out into a bed." My head jerked up. "You're welcome to stay with me as long as you need." I stared at her. "You're serious?" "Of course I am." She smiled softly. "It's not fancy, but it's comfortable." The diner suddenly felt very quiet. "You'd let me move in?" Without hesitation. My chest tightened so suddenly it almost hurt. This woman, who had the least money in our entire family, had just offered me nearly everything she had, and she hadn't even been asked. Tears filled my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Don't worry about paying it back right away," she said. "Focus on getting back on your feet first." Her voice softened. "Find a job that makes you happy this time. Life's too short to work somewhere that doesn't appreciate you." I nodded, unable to speak. When we left the diner, she hugged me again. "You're going to be okay, kiddo," she said warmly. "You're smart, capable. This is just a bump in the road." I watched her walk to her car, a faded blue Camry that rattled when the engine started. The same car she'd been driving for nearly 15 years. I sat in my own car afterward for a long time. The envelope lay on the passenger seat. $3,000. Money I knew she couldn't comfortably spare. The contrast between her response and everyone else's felt overwhelming. But the real shock came later that night, because curiosity got the better of me. And I decided to look something up. Prisca had always been private about her finances, but public information was surprisingly easy to find. Within 30 minutes, I had uncovered something that made my stomach drop. Her savings account. $3,200. That envelope contained almost everything she had. My chest tightened. But it got worse. I discovered medical billing records connected to her insurance filings, recent prescriptions, specialist visits, treatment codes. diabetes complications. The medication alone cost nearly $800 a month. And recently, her insurance coverage had changed, meaning her out-of-pocket expenses had increased dramatically. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. Priska had been quietly struggling with serious health issues, working extra tutoring hours just to cover her medical bills. And she had still handed me nearly all her savings, without hesitation, without conditions, without even asking for proof. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. Meanwhile, my mother had just spent $8,000 remodeling her bathroom. My sister had bought a brand new BMW. My father and Elviana had remodeled their kitchen, and none of them could spare $5,000. But Priska had given almost everything she had. I sat there in silence for a long time. The envelope resting on my desk, my mind replaying her words. Family helps family. Finally, I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city lights of Denver flickered quietly in the darkness. And in that moment, one thought became crystal clear. Priska deserved to know the truth. But when I told her, everything would change. The next evening, I invited Aunt Priska over for dinner. She arrived exactly on time, carrying a small paper bag from a local bakery. "I brought dessert," she said with a smile as she stepped inside my apartment. Inside the bag were 2 slices of lemon cake. "My students insisted I take them," she explained. "Apparently they believe sugar solves everything." I laughed softly and took the bag from her. "Sometimes it does." We sat down at the small dining table in my kitchen. I had made pasta, nothing fancy, just something warm and simple. For a while, the conversation stayed light. She asked about my job search. I asked about her students. But the entire time, something heavy pressed against my chest, because the envelope she had given me was still sitting in my desk drawer, untouched. By the time we finished eating, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I set 2 cups of tea on the coffee table and sat down across from her. "Priska," I said quietly. She looked up from stirring sugar into her tea. "Yes, sweetheart?" "There's something I need to tell you." Her expression stayed open and calm. "What is it?" I took a breath. "I haven't been completely honest with you." The room suddenly felt very still. "What do you mean?" she asked gently. "My company didn't shut down." She didn't interrupt. "I didn't lose my job." The words came out faster now. "I made up the story about needing money." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she remained silent. "I wanted to see who in the family would help me if I needed it." The confession hung in the air between us. For a moment, I couldn't read her expression. Then she leaned back slowly in her chair. "I see." Her voice was thoughtful rather than angry. "Are you mad?" I asked. The question slipped out before I could stop it. Priska considered it carefully. "No," she said after a moment. "Not angry." Her fingers wrapped around her teacup. "But maybe a little sad." My stomach tightened. "Sad that you felt you needed to test people that way." I stared at the floor. "You were the only one who helped." Her eyes softened. "Everyone else refused or made excuses." I told her everything. My mother deflecting responsibility. My father's lecture. Kelsey's luxury car and bathroom renovations. Lucas disappearing. Vanessa's criticism. Levi's empty promise. By the time I finished, the silence in the room felt heavy. Priska sighed quietly. "People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient," she said. I looked up. "That's exactly what happened." She nodded slowly. "I learned that lesson a long time ago myself." "What do you mean?" She set her tea down and folded her hands in her lap. "My ex-husband, Samuel." The name sounded unfamiliar. "Did I ever tell you why we divorced?" I shook my head. The family had always told a vague story about them simply growing apart. Priska smiled faintly. "That's the version people prefer." She leaned back slightly. "When my grandmother died, she left me a small inheritance." "How much?" $50,000. My eyebrows rose. "That's a lot." "It was a fortune to us at the time." Her voice carried the weight of memory. "I wanted to save it. Maybe use it as a down payment on a house someday." "What did Samuel want?" She laughed quietly. He had a dozen investment ideas. Restaurants, friends' businesses, quick opportunities. And you disagreed. Strongly. They fought about it for months. Then one afternoon, she discovered something. "He forged my signature," she said calmly. My stomach dropped. "He withdrew most of the money from our account." "Priska, It was gone within a year. The investment, a restaurant run by one of Samuel's friends, collapsed. Every dollar disappeared. When I confronted him, she continued softly, he told me something I never forgot. What? That it was our money, not just mine. Her smile was sad. As if my name on the inheritance meant nothing. I felt anger rise in my chest. That's horrible. She shrugged gently. It taught me an important lesson. What's that? She looked at me steadily. Some people see you as a person, and some people see you as a resource. The words echoed in my mind, because they described my entire experiment perfectly. Priska reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry your family made you feel like the second one. I swallowed hard. They did. Silence settled between us again. But this time, it felt different because the biggest secret still hadn't been spoken. I inhaled slowly. Priska, there's something else. She tilted her head slightly. What is it? My heart began pounding. I didn't just make up the story about losing my job. She waited. There's another reason I did the test. Her brow furrowed slightly. What reason? I took a deep breath. I won the lottery. For a moment, she didn't react. Then her eyes widened. How much? $42 million. The room went completely silent. The only sound was the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. I continued softly. It happened 3 weeks ago. I claimed the money through a blind trust so no one could find out. Her gaze stayed locked on mine. You're the first person I've told. Priska leaned back slowly. That's life-changing. It is. And you tested your family before telling them. I needed to know who I could trust. She nodded slowly. I understand. What would you do? I asked. If you were me? Priska thought for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised me. You don't owe anyone anything, Jazz. Not even me. I blinked. But I want to help you. With your medical bills, your house, anything. She smiled softly. I don't need anything. You just gave me almost your entire savings. That's different. How? Because I believed you needed it. She reached across the table again. But now I know you're safe. Her voice softened. That's enough for me. Emotion flooded my chest so suddenly it caught me off guard. This woman had given me nearly everything she had, and now that she knew I had millions, she still asked for nothing. In that moment, I understood something clearly. The experiment hadn't just revealed my family, it had revealed who truly deserved to be part of my life. And Priska was at the center of that answer. The morning after my conversation with Aunt Priska, I woke up feeling strangely calm. For 3 weeks, the lottery had felt like a secret weight pressing against my chest. Now that someone else knew, someone I trusted completely, that weight felt lighter. But there was still unfinished business. My family. They believed I was unemployed. They believed I was desperate enough to call every relative asking for money. And over the past few days, it had become clear that word of my financial crisis had spread through the family faster than sympathy ever had. My phone buzzed constantly with messages. Most of them weren't supportive. They were judgmental. One text from my mother read, "Heard you ask Kelsey for money too. You should have told me you were asking everyone. It feels like you're playing us against each other." Another from my father. "Elviana tells me you've been calling the whole family asking for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about." I stared at those messages for a long time. The irony was staggering. Not one of them had helped. But somehow, my asking had become the problem. That was when I decided something important. If they were already talking about me behind my back, then I would address it directly. So I sent a group message. I have an important announcement. Can everyone come to my apartment Sunday afternoon? To my surprise, everyone agreed. Apparently, curiosity was stronger than indifference. Sunday arrived quickly. By early afternoon, my small living room was crowded. My mother, Patricia, and Jude arrived first. My mother hugged me with theatrical concern. "Jazz, honey, we've all been so worried about you." I noticed Jude didn't say anything. He just looked around my apartment with mild disapproval. Next came my father, Gerald, and Elviana. Elviana kissed the air near my cheek without actually touching me. You look tired, she said critically. We were concerned about your financial situation. Concerned enough to refuse help, apparently. Then Kelsey and Andrew arrived. Kelsey looked uncomfortable, glancing around like she expected something dramatic. Finally, Lucas wandered in 10 minutes late. He avoided my eyes completely. Last through the door was Aunt Vanessa, wearing an expression that already suggested she expected to disapprove of whatever I was about to say. And then, quietly, Priska stepped inside. She met my eyes and gave me a small, knowing smile. No one else noticed. Once everyone had settled awkwardly into the chairs and couches, I stood near the center of the room. My hands were steady, which surprised me. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there's been a lot of discussion about my financial situation lately. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Lucas suddenly became fascinated with his phone. Kelsey and Andrew exchanged a glance. The truth is, I continued calmly, I'm actually fine. That statement alone caused several visible reactions. My mother blinked. What do you mean? I recently accepted a new job, I said. That part was technically true. After all, I had just appointed myself executive director of the nonprofit foundation Daniel and I were setting up. It has better pay and benefits than my previous position. My mother exhaled dramatically. Oh, thank goodness. Around the room, shoulders visibly relaxed. They had come expecting one of two things: either another request for money or a dramatic emotional breakdown. Instead, they were getting good news that required nothing from them. So what happened with the consulting firm? My father asked suspiciously. It closed, I said. That part was true. But the new position came through shortly afterward. My father frowned. Then why were you asking everyone for money? The question hung in the air. I met his gaze steadily. Because I thought I needed help. Silence filled the room. My unemployment benefits hadn't started yet, I continued calmly, and I believed family helps family. The phrase landed exactly where I intended. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Elviana spoke first. Well, everyone has financial commitments, she said defensively. It's not always possible to help, even when we want to. Of course, I said. We all have to decide what our priorities are. I turned toward Lucas. Speaking of priorities, Lucas, he finally looked up. Yes? You asked me for $3,000 last Christmas to help cover your rent. His face flushed. Yeah, well... When I asked you for help last week, I continued calmly, you didn't even call me back. I told you I was tight. You sent a 2-sentence text. The room went quiet. Lucas shifted in his chair. I had stuff going on. Calling me back would have been free. No one laughed. Then I turned to Kelsey. You told me you couldn't help because of the kids' tuition and the new BMW. Kelsey looked embarrassed. We really do have a lot of expenses right now. I'm sure you do. I looked at my mother next. You suggested I ask someone else. Her cheeks flushed slightly. I just thought your father might be in a better position. My father immediately objected. Now wait a minute. But I kept going. And Dad, I said calmly, you spent 20 minutes lecturing me about financial responsibility. He crossed his arms. Well, someone had to say it. I nodded. You never actually answered the question. The room had grown extremely uncomfortable. No one apologized. Instead, the explanations began. Mortgage payments, kids' expenses, unexpected bills, temporary financial strain, excuses layered on top of excuses. Finally, Aunt Vanessa spoke up. This entire situation is inappropriate, she said sharply. Families should not guilt each other over money. I smiled faintly. I agree. She blinked. I'm glad we understand each other. The meeting ended shortly afterward. One by one, they left my apartment. Some avoided eye contact. Others offered stiff goodbyes. No one admitted wrongdoing. No one apologized. But strangely, I didn't feel angry. As the door closed behind the last guest, the apartment fell quiet again. Priska stayed behind. She helped me gather empty coffee cups and stack plates in the kitchen. You handled that well, she said softly. It couldn't have been easy. I rinsed a mug under the sink. It was actually easier than I expected. She raised an eyebrow. Why? I dried my hands on a towel. For the first time in my life, I said slowly, I realized something. What? I'm not afraid of disappointing them anymore. Priska smiled gently. That's a powerful realization. I nodded. Their opinion of me was never based on who I really am. So what happens now? She asked. I leaned against the counter and looked out the kitchen window. The sky outside had turned soft pink as evening approached. Now, I said quietly, we start planning the future. Priska tilted her head. What kind of future? I smiled. One where we get to choose our family. The Monday after the family meeting, I sat in Daniel Richardson's office again. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows behind him, turning the Denver skyline into a hazy blur of glass and steel. On the desk between us lay a folder filled with documents that represented something I had spent years dreaming about, but never truly believing was possible. Freedom. Daniel flipped through several pages while I watched quietly. So, he said finally, adjusting his glasses, you're ready to move forward with the long-term plan? Yes, he nodded. Tell me again what you want to prioritize. I didn't hesitate. First, I want to establish a trust for my Aunt Priska. Daniel began writing immediately. Medical coverage? Full coverage, I said. Her diabetes treatment, specialist visits, medication, everything. And monthly support? Yes, something comfortable, but not overwhelming. Priska had made one thing very clear when we talked about it later that week. She didn't want a sudden windfall. I don't want to feel like I won the lottery through you, she had told me. I just want to feel secure. So Daniel and I structured the trust carefully. A monthly stipend that would cover her expenses. A separate medical fund to ensure her treatment never became a financial burden again. And one more thing. I want to buy her a house, I added. Daniel looked up. What kind of house? Small, comfortable. I pictured the place immediately. 1 floor, wide doorways, easy to move around in. Something that would still work on the days when her diabetes made walking difficult. He nodded. That's easy enough to arrange. We spent the next hour reviewing other parts of the plan. Investment diversification, tax strategies, charitable structures, and finally, my own future. What about your job? Daniel asked. I'm giving notice this week. His eyebrows rose slightly. You're sure? I smiled. I've been sure for years. Accounting had never been my dream. It had simply been the most practical path available when I graduated college with student loans and no safety net. Now, things were different. I want to build something, I said. What kind of something? I thought about Priska. Her small apartment, her aging car, her quiet struggles that almost no one in the family had ever noticed. I want to start a nonprofit. Daniel leaned back in his chair. What kind? One that helps elderly people living alone. He nodded slowly. There's definitely a need for that, especially people who had become isolated from their families. People who needed help with small things. Home repairs. Medical bills, transportation, companionship. I'm calling it Second Family, I said. Daniel smiled. That's a good name. 2 weeks later, I walked into Kenneth's office at the consulting firm. He barely looked up from his computer. What's up? I'm resigning. That got his attention. He leaned back in his chair. You're quitting? Yes. When? 2 weeks. He stared at me for a moment. You're one of our strongest analysts. That was probably the closest thing to praise I had ever received from him. I appreciate that, but I've decided to move on. Where are you going? I smiled politely. A nonprofit. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Well, he said after a pause, that's admirable. For once, I didn't feel any need to justify myself. Over the next several months, my life changed in ways I never could have predicted. The nonprofit grew quickly. At first, it was just me in a small rented office. Then Morgan joined. When I finally told her the truth about the lottery, her reaction was exactly what I should have expected. She stared at me for a full 10 seconds. Then she said, "You absolute idiot." I blinked. That's not the reaction I was expecting. You tested your entire family and didn't tell your best friend you won $42 million? I had a lot to process. Morgan shook her head. Next time you win the lottery, I'd appreciate a little warning. But once the shock passed, She became the most enthusiastic supporter of the nonprofit. Her nursing background turned out to be invaluable. She knew exactly how to connect with elderly patients who felt forgotten by the world. Within 6 months, Second Family had helped over 70 seniors across Denver. By the end of the year, that number would reach 200. Meanwhile, Priska's life quietly transformed. 3 blocks away from my new house sat a cozy single-story craftsman with a wide porch and a small garden in the backyard. That house belonged to her now. The first time she saw it, she cried. "I can't believe this is real," she whispered as she stood in the doorway. "You deserve it," I said. Her health improved dramatically once she had consistent medical care. The constant financial stress that had haunted her for years simply disappeared. She retired from teaching that winter, but she didn't stop working entirely. 3 days a week, she volunteered at a literacy program for children. Books should never feel out of reach, she liked to say. My relationship with the rest of my family changed too. Not dramatically, just quietly. I still attended occasional holiday dinners, still exchanged birthday messages, but the expectation of emotional closeness had vanished, and strangely, that made everything easier. Without the illusion of intimacy, the interactions felt lighter, less painful. None of them knew about the lottery. As far as they were concerned, I had simply found success in nonprofit work. And interestingly, they never asked many questions, which told me everything I needed to know about their curiosity regarding my life. There were moments when I considered telling them the truth, usually when Lucas called asking for money for another business idea, or when Kelsey complained about the cost of remodeling her kitchen. But each time I remembered something important: the silence, the week when I had needed help, and the decision became easy. Still, there were times when family members truly needed assistance. When my father had a minor heart attack that year, I anonymously paid part of his hospital bill through the patient assistance program. When Levi finally entered rehab for his drinking problem, I made a quiet donation to cover his treatment. They never knew, and I preferred it that way, because the help came without expectation, without obligation, without the complicated emotional weight money had always carried in my family. And that felt right. 1 year later, my life looked nothing like it had the night I sat alone in my tiny apartment, staring at 6 matching lottery numbers. That apartment was gone now. In its place stood a modest but beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood just outside Denver. It wasn't a mansion, no marble staircases or infinity pools or private gates, just a comfortable house with wide windows, warm sunlight in the mornings, and a small garden that I had slowly learned how to keep alive. Every morning I stepped onto the back patio with a cup of coffee and listened to the quiet sounds of the neighborhood waking up. Birds, sprinklers, distant traffic, peace. 3 blocks away, Priska's house stood on a corner lot with a big maple tree in the front yard. The house was perfect for her. Single story, wide doorways, easy to navigate on the days when her diabetes made walking difficult. But most importantly, it felt like home. The living room shelves were filled with books. Plants covered nearly every window. A small rocking chair sat on the porch where she liked to read in the evenings. Her health had improved dramatically. With proper medication, regular checkups, and far less financial stress, the exhaustion that had once shadowed her face had faded. She had officially retired from teaching 6 months earlier, but she still spent 3 mornings a week volunteering at a literacy program. Watching her read with children reminded me of something important. Some people never stop giving, even when the world gives them very little in return. The nonprofit had grown far beyond what I imagined when the idea first formed in Daniel's office. Second Family now had a small team. Morgan had become our outreach coordinator, bringing her nursing experience and sharp instincts to every case we handled. Our mission was simple: help elderly people who were living alone. Sometimes that meant something small: fixing a broken heater, driving someone to a doctor's appointment, delivering groceries. Other times it meant something bigger: covering medical bills, repairing unsafe housing, connecting isolated seniors with volunteers who simply came by to talk. In 1 year, we had helped more than 200 seniors across Colorado. The work was exhausting sometimes, but it was the most meaningful thing I had ever done. Far more fulfilling than balancing corporate spreadsheets. My friendship with Morgan had changed too, not in distance, but in comfort. She eventually forgave me for keeping the lottery secret at first, mostly, although she still liked to remind me occasionally. "You know," she said one night while we sat on my patio drinking wine, "most people tell their best friend when they win $42 million. I laughed. I was overwhelmed. "You were paranoid." "That too." But eventually, the secret stopped feeling like a burden, because the only people who knew were the ones who truly deserved to. Morgan, Daniel, and Priska. My relationship with the rest of my family had settled into something quieter, polite, occasional, but distant. We still saw each other during holidays. Birthday phone calls still happened, but the emotional closeness I had spent years trying to force had finally disappeared. And strangely, that made everything easier. Without the expectation of deeper connection, their opinions stopped carrying the same weight. None of them knew about the lottery. As far as they were concerned, I had simply found success in nonprofit management. They accepted that explanation without much curiosity, which told me everything I needed to know. There were moments when the truth almost slipped out, like when Lucas called asking for money for a fantastic business opportunity, or when Kelsey complained about how expensive her new kitchen renovation had become. But each time I remembered something: the silence, the week when I had needed help, and the decision stayed simple. Interestingly, there were still moments when I helped them, just not the way they expected. When my father had his heart attack that spring, I quietly paid a large portion of his medical bill through the hospital's patient assistance program. He never knew where the money came from. When Levi finally entered rehab for his drinking problem, I made an anonymous donation to the treatment center to cover several months of his stay. No one in the family knew about that either. I preferred it that way, because the help came without expectation, without the complicated emotional weight money had always carried in our family. One evening near the end of that first year, I sat on Priska's porch watching the sunset. The sky stretched across the horizon in shades of gold and pink. Priska rocked gently in her chair beside me. "You know what still amazes me?" she said after a while. "What?" "How differently everything could have turned out." I smiled. "If I had announced the lottery right away?" She nodded. "The entire family would have suddenly become very attentive." I laughed softly. "Very attentive. And you would never have known what was real." Her words hung in the warm evening air. She was right. If I had told everyone about the money immediately, I might have gained admiration, attention, requests, but I would have lost something far more valuable: clarity. The experiment had been painful, but it had revealed the truth. Not just about them, about me. Before the lottery, I had believed my value came from what I could give: money, support, sacrifice. I thought love had to be earned through generosity, but Priska had shown me something different. Real love doesn't keep a balance sheet. It doesn't measure worth in dollars or favors. It shows up when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Priska reached over and patted my hand. "You did good, kiddo. Not just with the money, with what you learned." I smiled at her. I had a good teacher. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in deeper shades of orange and purple. For a moment, we sat in silence, just listening to the quiet evening. The lottery had given me millions, but that wasn't the most valuable thing it had given me. The real gift had been something much rarer: the freedom to see people clearly, to understand who truly belonged in my life, and to build a future around the ones who stayed, even when I had nothing to offer but myself. My name is Maria Hartley. I'm 31 years old, and 7 years ago, the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally taught me a lesson I would never forget. They taught me exactly how alone a person can feel in this world. Ironically, the story didn't start with a betrayal. It started with a diagnosis, but the betrayal came quickly after. The phone call from my mother came on a Tuesday evening while my husband James and I were making dinner together. The smell of garlic and butter filled the kitchen as he stirred pasta on the stove. The number flashing on my phone froze me in place. I hadn't seen it in 7 years. Not since the night everything shattered. "Maria?" James noticed the color draining from my face. "What's wrong?" I turned the screen toward him. "Mom calling." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. 7 years of silence. 7 years without a single message, holiday card, or birthday call. And suddenly, she wanted to talk. I felt something strange twist inside my chest. Not hope, not excitement. Just a dull curiosity. "Do you want to answer it?" James asked gently. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to decline the call and throw the phone across the room. But another part, the part that had spent years wondering why my parents had erased me from their lives, needed to hear what she had to say. I stepped into the bedroom and answered. "Hello?" There was a brief pause. Then my mother's voice, tentative, uncertain. "Maria, it's Mom. 7 years." And that was all she said. No apology. No explanation. Just Mom. My stomach tightened. "What do you want?" The words came out colder than I expected. But honestly, they were still kinder than what she deserved. "We need to talk," she said carefully. Something about the way she said it immediately told me this conversation wasn't about reconciliation. It was about something else, something she wanted. But before I tell you what she asked for, you need to understand what happened 7 years ago. Because without that moment, none of this would make sense. I was 24 years old when I was diagnosed with lupus. If you don't know what lupus is, imagine your immune system turning against your own body, your organs, your joints, your skin, your entire existence. The diagnosis came after months of unexplained pain and exhaustion. I remember sitting in the sterile doctor's office, the fluorescent lights humming softly above us. The doctor spoke gently, but the words still felt like falling off a cliff. "Lupus is manageable," he said, "but you'll need medication and regular treatment." Then he mentioned the cost, $800 a month. My insurance barely covered anything. At the time, I was working as a freelance graphic designer. Some months, I made good money. Other months, I barely scraped by. $800 might as well have been $8,000. For 3 weeks, I tried to make it work on my own. I cut every expense possible, sold my tablet, canceled my internet, stopped going out with friends. But the numbers didn't lie. Eventually, pride gave way to survival. So one night, I called my parents. I still remember exactly where I was standing when I made that call. In the corner of my tiny studio apartment, staring at a stack of unpaid medical bills, my hands shaking. "Mom," I said when she answered, "I need help." There was a long silence, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then my father's voice came through the speaker, cold, sharp. "Maria, you're 24 years old." My chest tightened. "You need to figure these things out yourself." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. The words didn't make sense. I wasn't asking for a luxury car or a vacation. I wasn't asking them to pay my rent forever or support me indefinitely. I was asking for help paying for medication that kept my immune system from destroying my own organs. "Dad," I said carefully, forcing calm into my voice, "it's temporary, just until I stabilize my work again. I'm applying for steady contracts." Another pause followed. Then my mother spoke. "We can't enable dependency, Maria." The word dependency echoed in my ears. "I'm sick," I whispered. "We understand that," she replied, in a tone that suggested the opposite. "But adulthood means learning to solve your own problems." Something cracked inside my chest. The conversation escalated quickly after that. 7 years later, I still remember every sentence, every word. "You're not the only person who struggles," my father said. "You need to learn resilience. Plenty of people handle worse situations without running to their parents." I stood there clutching my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Running to my parents?" I repeated quietly. "I'm asking for help staying alive." My father sighed impatiently. "You're exaggerating." That was the moment something inside me finally broke. A dam that had been building for years. "Of course you think I'm exaggerating," I snapped. "Because Vanessa has always been perfect, right? Vanessa never has problems. Vanessa never needs help. Vanessa is everything you ever wanted." The line went silent, which told me I had struck the truth. My older sister Vanessa had always been the golden child, 3 years older than me, confident, beautiful. the kind of woman who seemed to glide through life effortlessly. By 25, she had already achieved everything my parents admired. She married her college sweetheart, Richard Lawson, a charming marketing executive who seemed to have stepped straight out of a magazine advertisement. They bought a beautiful house in the suburbs with a white picket fence. 2 daughters followed soon after, Emma and Sophia, the quieter little girl who spent hours twirling in ballet classes. My parents adored them. Their house was filled with framed photos of Vanessa's perfect life, holiday cards, school family portraits taken on sunny beaches. Meanwhile, I was the daughter who never quite fit their image, the one who didn't marry young, the one who struggled with health problems they found inconvenient. Vanessa never asks for handouts, my father said finally, because she never has to. The call ended badly. Voices raised, old resentments spilling out like poison. I told them exactly what I thought of their so-called tough love. They accused me of being dramatic and entitled. That night marked the beginning of 7 years of silence. And the truth is, those 7 years were the hardest and most transformative period of my life. Without their help, survival became a daily battle. I sold my camera, my laptop, even the small collection of jewelry my grandmother had left me. Some nights I ate nothing but ramen noodles. Other nights I skipped dinner entirely to save money for medication. When my landlord raised the rent, I couldn't afford it anymore, so I gave up my apartment. For months I moved between friends' couches. Eventually, even that became unsustainable. There was a 3-week period I rarely talk about. 3 weeks where I slept in my car. The lupus flare-ups made everything worse. My joints burned constantly. Fatigue wrapped around my body like wet cement. There were nights I genuinely wondered if I would wake up the next morning. But somehow I kept going. 1 freelance project turned into 2. 2 turned into 5. Word of mouth spread. Clients started recommending me to others. Slowly, painfully slowly, my design business began to grow. By the time I was 27, I had something that resembled stability. Not luxury, not comfort, but stability. And somewhere during that rebuilding process, I met James Carter. We met at a small networking event for creative freelancers. I almost didn't attend because my joints were aching that night, but something pushed me to go. James was standing near the coffee table when I first noticed him. Tall, quiet, observant. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, but when he spoke, people listened. Our first conversation lasted nearly an hour. Not once did he interrupt me. Not once did he look at his phone. By the end of the evening, he asked if I wanted to get dinner sometime. There was no grand romantic moment, no cinematic sparks, just a quiet sense of safety I hadn't felt in years. Over time, that quiet safety became love. 2 years ago, we got married in a small ceremony surrounded by his family. His parents hugged me like they had known me forever. His sister cried during the vows. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. Meanwhile, from a distance, I occasionally heard fragments of news about Vanessa. Her life still appeared perfect. But appearances can be deceptive. The first cracks began appearing about 3 years ago, though at the time, no one realized how deep those cracks would go. Richard, the flawless son-in-law my parents adored, had developed a gambling habit. At first it seemed harmless. Office fantasy football leagues, weekend poker games with coworkers, occasional trips to casinos during business conferences. But addictions rarely stay small. Slowly, quietly, it spread through their finances like a disease. Credit cards began filling up. Then came secret loans, a refinancing of their home, money pulled from retirement accounts. Vanessa didn't know any of this, not until the day their mortgage payment bounced, and the foreclosure notice arrived in the mail. That was the moment their perfect life finally started collapsing. But the worst part was still ahead, because Richard's addiction was far deeper than anyone imagined. And soon, the fallout would reach far beyond their marriage. Eventually, it would reach me. When Vanessa opened the foreclosure notice, the first thing she did was assume it was a mistake. That's what people do when their reality cracks suddenly. They look for the simplest explanation. A banking error, a lost payment, a technical glitch. But when she checked their accounts, the truth began unfolding. piece by piece, like a slow nightmare. Their mortgage hadn't been paid in 2 months. 3 of Richard's credit cards were maxed out, and their savings account, once comfortably stocked, was nearly empty. When Richard came home that night, Vanessa confronted him in the kitchen. I didn't witness that conversation, of course. But over time, pieces of the story filtered through the extended family. Richard didn't deny it. Apparently, he broke down almost immediately. Years of lies spilled out in one exhausted confession. The gambling had started small, fantasy football leagues at work. A few $100s here and there, the kind of bets people laugh about afterward. But wins created confidence. Confidence created risk. And risk slowly turned into addiction. Before long, he was making larger bets, then visiting casinos during business trips. Eventually, he began gambling online late at night after Vanessa and the girls had gone to sleep. Each loss demanded another bet. Each bet promised the illusion of recovery. By the time Vanessa discovered the truth, Richard had accumulated nearly $90,000 in hidden debt, and most of it had been carefully concealed. Secret credit cards, loans she never knew existed, even refinancing their home without explaining the full situation. It's terrifying how easily someone can destroy a life built on trust. But what shocked everyone most was that Vanessa didn't leave immediately. She tried to save the marriage. Richard promised to get help. He joined Gamblers Anonymous. They started couples counseling. Vanessa met with financial advisors, trying desperately to untangle the mess. For a while, it seemed like things might recover. My parents rallied around them completely. They helped with temporary expenses. They babysat the girls. They praised Vanessa endlessly for being such a strong wife standing by her husband. And maybe, for a short time, it actually worked. Richard stayed clean for nearly 4 months. The tension in the family slowly eased. Everyone convinced themselves the worst was over. But addiction doesn't disappear just because people want it to. It waits. Quietly. Patiently. Until the moment weakness returns. That moment came 6 months ago. Vanessa had gone out of town for a weekend conference related to her job. Richard stayed home with the girls. At least, that's what he told her. Instead, he drove to Las Vegas. By the time Vanessa returned Sunday night, the damage had already been done. She discovered it Monday morning while checking their accounts. Both of their daughters' college funds were gone. Every dollar. $23,000. Money my parents had been slowly contributing for years. Money meant to give Emma and Sophia a future. Richard had drained the accounts during a single gambling binge. When Vanessa confronted him, there were no promises left. No excuses. No illusions. Just the hollow truth. Their marriage was finished. Vanessa filed for divorce within a week. Richard didn't fight it. Apparently, he was too ashamed. He moved out almost immediately, staying with his brother while the legal process unfolded. Meanwhile, the financial consequences crashed down all at once. Their house was already deep in foreclosure. The credit card companies were calling daily. The legal fees for the divorce added another layer of strain. Vanessa had no choice. She packed up her daughters and moved back into our parents' house. At first, everyone believed the arrangement would be temporary, just a few months while she found a job and rebuilt her finances. But reality rarely moves that quickly. Their income was fixed. Suddenly, their quiet retirement home was housing 4 additional people. 2 energetic children, a daughter dealing with emotional collapse, and the growing financial pressure of supporting everyone. Emma and Sophia were struggling with the divorce. Sophia had nightmares for weeks. Emma started acting out at school. Vanessa herself barely held things together. She spent hours searching job listings, other hours crying behind closed doors. And somewhere during those exhausting months, my parents remembered something. They had another daughter. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening, 7 years after our last conversation. 7 years without a single attempt to check if I was alive. My mother's voice sounded almost cautious. "Maria, we need to talk." I stood in our bedroom with the door closed, staring at the wall. "What do you want?" I asked. She hesitated before answering. "Your sister is going through a difficult time." There it was. Not an apology. Not a question about my health. Straight to Vanessa. "Richard's gambling destroyed their marriage," she continued. "Vanessa and the girls are staying with us while she gets back on her feet." I said nothing. Silence can be a powerful tool in conversations like this. People eventually reveal their real intentions if you give them enough space. And sure enough, my mother continued, "We're retired now, Maria. Supporting 3 extra people has stretched our finances thin." I closed my eyes. I already knew where this conversation was heading. "Vanessa is looking for work," she added quickly, "but it takes time. We were wondering if you could help us financially for a while." The audacity was breathtaking. 7 years of silence. 7 years where they never once checked if I survived the illness they refused to help me treat. And now they were asking me for money. "You're joking," I said flatly. "Mia, we're family." The word made my stomach twist. "We need to support each other during difficult times." I laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. "Family?" I said slowly. "Where was family when I was sick?" My mother's voice tightened. "That was different." "Different how?" "You needed to learn independence." My hands started shaking. "And Vanessa doesn't?" "This situation involves innocent children." "I was an innocent child once too," I replied. "I didn't ask for lupus." The conversation spiraled from there. She accused me of holding grudges. I reminded her of their exact words from 7 years earlier. "Don't rely on us just because we're family. You need to figure things out yourself." For a moment, she was completely silent. Then she said something that confirmed everything. "People change, Maria." I took a slow breath. "Then here's my answer." The words came out steady. "Figure it out yourselves." And I hung up. But that phone call wasn't the end of their plan. It was only the beginning. Because 3 days later, the guilt campaign started. 3 days after I hung up on my mother, the first message arrived. It came from my Aunt Clarissa. I hadn't spoken to her in years either. But suddenly, my phone lit up with her name. "Maria, your parents told me what's happening. I can't believe you would abandon your family like this. Those poor girls need stability." I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone face down on the table. James glanced up from the couch. "Family?" he asked carefully. "Extended family," I said. But that was only the beginning. Within hours, more messages arrived. Cousins, family, friends, people I hadn't heard from since childhood. The wording varied slightly, but the message was always the same. "Your parents are struggling. Vanessa is devastated. The girls are innocent. How can you turn your back on family?" It was so coordinated, it almost felt rehearsed. And honestly, I knew exactly who had orchestrated it. My parents. They had always been skilled at controlling the narrative. In their version of events, they were the self-sacrificing grandparents, raising their daughter's children after a terrible tragedy. And I was the cold, successful daughter who refused to help. The villain of the story. For the first 2 days, I ignored the messages. Then my cousin Isabella called. Unlike the others, she sounded genuinely upset. Her voice was trembling when I answered. "Maria, please tell me this isn't true." I leaned back in my chair. "Which part?" "That you're refusing to help Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert." I closed my eyes. "Did anyone tell you why I haven't spoken to them in 7 years? There was a pause. "They said you held on to some old grudge." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Of course they did." "Maria, Emma, and Sophia are just children," Isabella continued. "They lost their home. Their father destroyed their family. And now they might lose their stability with their grandparents, too." Her voice cracked. "How can you live with yourself?" I let the silence stretch for a moment. Then I asked quietly, "Isabella, do you know what lupus is?" She hesitated. "Not really. It's an autoimmune disease. My immune system attacks my own body." Another pause. "When I was 24, I was diagnosed with it. My medication cost $800 a month." The line went completely silent. "I asked my parents for help," I continued calmly, "just for a few months until I found stable work." "And?" she whispered. "They told me to figure it out myself." I heard her inhale sharply. "I nearly died trying to survive without treatment," I said. "I rationed medication. I slept in my car for 3 weeks. I sold everything I owned. But they never told us that." Of course they didn't. Silence hung between us. Then Isabella said softly, "The girls are still innocent." "You're right," I replied. "They are. But so was I. There was nothing more to say after that. She ended the call quietly. That night, James and I sat together at the kitchen table. My phone continued vibrating with new messages. James looked at me with concern. "You don't have to deal with this," he said gently. "I know. But it's getting worse." I nodded. "They're trying to wear me down. Do you want to respond to them?" I thought about it for a moment. Then I shook my head. No. Instead, we made a decision. We blocked every number that had participated in the guilt campaign. Aunts, cousins, family, friends, anyone who tried to pressure me. Then we changed our phone numbers, locked down our social media, cut every remaining line of contact. If my parents wanted to speak to me again, they would have to make a real effort, the same effort they had refused to make 7 years earlier. For 2 weeks, life returned to normal. The silence felt like relief. I worked. James and I cooked dinner together every night. We watched movies, went on walks, lived the quiet life we had built. And then one afternoon, everything changed again. I was in the front garden planting spring bulbs when I heard a car pull up. At first, I assumed it was a delivery driver, but when I looked up, I saw a taxi parked by the curb. 2 familiar figures stepped out. My parents. They looked older than I remembered. My father paid the driver while my mother scanned the yard until her eyes landed on me. "Maria," she called. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run inside and lock the door. But I didn't, because this was my house, my life, and I wasn't going to hide from people who had once abandoned me. I stood slowly, brushing dirt from my gloves. "What are you doing here?" My father approached first. "Maria, we need to talk." "About what?" He hesitated before answering. "About our family." My mother stepped forward beside him. "About healing old wounds." Their tone was completely different from the phone call. Softer. Carefully measured, like diplomats negotiating a fragile treaty. "We know we made mistakes," my father said. "When you were sick, we thought we were teaching you independence." My mother nodded eagerly. "We realize now we were wrong." I studied their faces carefully. For 7 years, I had imagined hearing those words. But now that they were finally here, something felt off. The apology sounded rehearsed, calculated. "You took a taxi across town to apologize for something that happened 7 years ago?" I asked. My father cleared his throat. "Well, we thought it would be good to clear the air before discussing Vanessa's situation." There it was. The real reason. "So the apology is conditional," I said. "No," my mother protested quickly. "We genuinely want to repair our relationship." I crossed my arms. "Would you still be standing in my driveway if Vanessa's marriage hadn't collapsed?" Neither of them answered, and that silence told me everything. The silence stretched between us and my driveway like a rope pulled too tight. Cars passed slowly on the quiet suburban street. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked, then fell silent again. But right there, between the 3 of us, the air felt heavy with 7 years of unfinished truth. My father finally shifted his weight. "That's not fair, Maria." I tilted my head slightly. "Isn't it?" "People can change," he said stiffly. "Circumstances make you reflect on your mistakes." "Circumstances like needing money from the daughter you abandoned?" I asked calmly. My mother's expression tightened. "We didn't abandon you." The words landed like a spark on gasoline. "You didn't?" I said quietly. Images flashed through my mind. The cramped car seat where I had slept for 3 weeks. The empty pill bottles. The nights when the pain in my joints was so intense I could barely move. "You told me to figure things out myself," I continued. "While I was choosing between medication and food." My father frowned, clearly irritated. "You're exaggerating again." I laughed softly. "No, I'm remembering." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then my mother tried a different tactic. "We thought we were helping you grow stronger," she said gently. "By refusing to help me survive?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see them recalculating, adjusting their approach. They had come here expecting guilt to work. When that failed, they tried sympathy. Now they were searching for another strategy. But I was done playing along. "You want to know what's really happening here?" I asked. My parents exchanged uneasy glances. I continued anyway. Vanessa was always the golden child. "That's not true," my mother snapped. I raised a hand. "Let me finish." The words came faster now, fueled by years of bottled anger. Perfect marriage, perfect husband, perfect house, perfect grandchildren. My father shifted uncomfortably. You invested everything in her life because it reflected well on you. That's ridiculous, he muttered. Is it? I asked. When Richard's gambling destroyed that perfect image, you couldn't accept it. So you doubled down, supporting Vanessa financially, supporting the girls. Of course we support them, my mother said defensively. They're family. The word hung in the air. I let it sit there for a moment before responding. Interesting. My father frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means you suddenly believe families should support each other. I stepped closer. Where was that belief 7 years ago? My father's jaw tightened. That situation was different. Different how? You needed discipline. I stared at him. You call lupus discipline? Neither of them answered. So I continued. I rationed medication that kept my immune system from destroying my organs. My voice remained calm, but my hands were shaking. I lived in my car for 3 weeks because I couldn't afford rent and treatment. My mother's eyes widened slightly, but I didn't stop. I sold Grandma's jewelry, the only thing I had left from her, just to buy medication that cost more than most people's rent. For a brief moment, something real flickered across their faces. Guilt. Or maybe discomfort. But it vanished quickly. You survived, my father said quietly. The sentence stunned me. You're stronger now because of it. A hollow laugh escaped my throat. I survived despite you, I said. Not because of you. At that moment, the front door opened. James stepped onto the porch. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching the conversation unfold. His presence alone reminded me of something important. I wasn't alone anymore. Maria, my mother said again, her voice softening. Emma and Sophia need stability. Like I needed stability when I was sick? This is about children, she insisted. And I was your child. The words fell like a hammer. My father's patience finally snapped. So you're willing to punish innocent children because you're holding a grudge? I'm not punishing anyone. I met his gaze directly. I'm applying the same rules you taught me. What rules? That adults solve their own problems. That family isn't an automatic safety net. That people shouldn't rely on others just because they share blood. My mother gasped softly. How can you be so cruel? I'm not cruel, I said. I'm consistent. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Finally, my father straightened his shoulders. Fine. If that's how you want to handle this, we'll manage without you. I nodded. Yes. Just like I managed without you. They turned toward the street where their taxi was waiting. But just before getting inside, my mother stopped and looked back. When you have children someday, she said quietly, you'll understand how difficult these decisions are. For the first time during the entire conversation, I smiled. Not with bitterness, but with calm certainty. When I have children, I said, they'll never have to question whether I love them. They'll never have to choose between their health and my approval. And they'll never wonder if my support comes with conditions. My mother looked away. A moment later, the taxi pulled away from the curb. James walked down from the porch and wrapped his arms around me. We stood there together in the garden, watching the car disappear around the corner. Watching the past leave with it. 3 months later, I heard through extended relatives that Vanessa had found a job. She moved into a small apartment with Emma and Sophia. The girls were adjusting. My parents quietly sold their larger house and downsized to something more affordable. In the end, they figured it out themselves, exactly the way they had once told me to do. 6 months after that, James and I shared our own news. We were expecting our first child. We told his parents first, then his sister, then the friends who had become our chosen family over the years. People who loved us, not because they were obligated to, but because they wanted to. My parents will never meet this child. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of protection. Because some cycles need to be broken. Some patterns need to end. And for the first time in my life, I am finally free. My name is Natalie Mitchell. I'm 32 years old. And 8 weeks before my wedding, a single text message taught me something I will probably remember for the rest of my life. Sometimes the clearest red flags don't come from the person you're marrying. They come from the people around them. It was a Monday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk in my apartment living room, finalizing the last few wedding details between work emails. My laptop was open to a spreadsheet labeled Wedding Budget, Final Adjustments. The numbers were neat, organized. I've always liked things that way. Outside the window, late summer sunlight spilled across the balcony. The city buzzed softly below. Everything felt normal, calm, exciting even. After 4 years together and 1 year engaged, my boyfriend, Ethan Carter, and I were finally about to get married. 8 weeks. That was all that remained. We had just gone cake tasting 2 days earlier. Ethan had insisted the chocolate ganache layer was life-changing. I still remember laughing when he said it. Then my phone buzzed. A message notification. The name on the screen made me pause. Lily Dawson, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. And also, somewhat awkwardly, the maid of honor at our wedding. They had dated briefly years before we met, but stayed friends. At least, that was the story. Her message read, "Hey, Natalie. I need to talk to you about something important. Ethan doesn't know I'm reaching out." I frowned slightly. My first thought was something harmless. Maybe she needed help coordinating the bachelorette party, or had a question about the bridesmaid dresses. So I replied, "What's going on?" The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, her message came through. "Look, I care about both of you, so I'm just going to be honest. Ethan has been having second thoughts." For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Second thoughts? That didn't make sense. We had literally been sampling wedding cake together 2 days earlier. I typed slowly. Second thoughts about what? Her reply came almost immediately, about whether you're the right partner for the future he wants. A strange heaviness settled in my stomach. I leaned back in my chair. My brain tried to process the sentence in 10 different ways. None of them made it feel better. What future exactly? Her next message was longer. "He feels like you're not really committed to building the lifestyle he wants. Like, you still drive that old Camry, and you're living in that small apartment. He just needs to know you can provide the life he deserves." I blinked. Once. Twice. My 2018 Toyota Camry runs perfectly. My apartment is a 2-bedroom in a good neighborhood. The rent is $2,100 a month. Not luxurious, but comfortable and stable. I make $78,000 a year as a project manager. I save about $1,500 every month. I'm not rich, but I've always believed financial stability matters more than appearances. I typed carefully. "What exactly are you suggesting, Lily?" There was a short pause. Then the message appeared. "If you really love him, you should show it." I felt a flicker of irritation, but I kept reading. "Ethan has always dreamed of owning a Mercedes C-Class. If you bought it for him as a pre-wedding gift, it would show you're serious about giving him the life he wants." My fingers froze above the keyboard. A Mercedes. Those start around $45,000. I read the message again just to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. Then came the final line. "Otherwise, I don't know if this wedding is going to happen." For a long moment, I said nothing. I simply stared at my phone. Let me clarify something important. The wedding deposits. The venue deposit alone was $8,500. Ethan had insisted on that specific place. He said his parents had given him money for it, so the deposit went under his name. The catering deposit, $3,200, also under his name, because he wanted to earn credit card reward points. Photographer, DJ, florist, another $4,000 combined, all in Ethan's name. He said it would help him build credit. At the time, I hadn't questioned it. Now it suddenly felt significant. I typed slowly. "So you're telling me if I don't buy Ethan a $45,000 car, he might cancel the wedding?" Her response came quickly. "I'm trying to help you here. He's my best friend. I know what he needs. This would prove you're willing to invest in your future together." I read the message 3 times. Then I typed 2 words. "Understood." A second later, Lily replied, "So you'll do it?" I didn't answer. Instead, I closed the chat and sat very still in my chair. 5 minutes passed. Then I picked up my phone again. But instead of texting Ethan, I dialed the wedding venue. "Hello, this is Natalie Mitchell," I said calmly when the coordinator answered. I'm calling about the Mitchell-Carter wedding scheduled for September 15th. Yes, of course, the woman said brightly. How can I help you? I need to cancel the reservation. A pause. Oh no, is everything okay? I kept my voice steady. I understand the deposit is non-refundable. That's correct, she said gently. The account holder would need to address any deposit issues. That's fine, I said. Please list the cancellation reason as financial extortion concerns. There was a confused silence. I'm sorry, did you say extortion? Yes, that's the reason. Then I hung up. Next, I called the catering company. Same conversation, same cancellation reason. Then the photographer, the DJ, the florist. Every vendor, one by one. By the time I finished, about an hour had passed. Then I opened the group chat with my bridesmaids. I typed a single message. Wedding's off. I'll explain tomorrow. Please don't contact Ethan yet. My best friend Daniel replied instantly. Are you okay? I looked around my quiet apartment, then typed back. I'm perfectly fine. And then I waited. Exactly 3 hours and 16 minutes later, my phone exploded. Not metaphorically, literally. The screen lit up so many times in a row that the vibration on my desk sounded like a swarm of angry bees. The first name that appeared was Ethan. Then again, and again, and again. When I finally glanced at the call log, there were 42 missed calls from him alone. Then the texts started pouring in. Ethan, what did you do? Ethan, the venue just called me saying you canceled everything. Ethan, Natalie, answer your phone. A few seconds later, they're saying I owe the entire deposit. Then, what is financial extortion? Then the one that made me raise an eyebrow. If this is about Lily, I can explain. Interesting. So he knew exactly why I canceled. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I placed my phone face down on the table and poured myself a glass of water. Then Lily started calling. I declined the first call, then the second. Then the third. She switched to texts. You completely misunderstood. I was trying to help you. Ethan is devastated. You're ruining everything over a miscommunication. And my personal favorite? A real woman would have just bought the car instead of throwing a tantrum. I stared at that message for a moment and laughed softly. Then my phone rang again. This time the name on the screen was Patricia Carter, Ethan's mother. I hesitated, then answered. Hello, Patricia. Her voice came through, strained and breathless. Natalie, what is going on? Ethan is hysterical. The venue called saying you canceled the wedding. I leaned back in my chair. Yes, I canceled it. But why? Because apparently your son has been having second thoughts unless I buy him a Mercedes. Silence. The kind of silence that stretches long enough to feel heavy. Finally, she spoke again. I'm sorry. What? Lily informed me Ethan needs reassurance that I can provide the lifestyle he deserves. Another pause. Then Patricia muttered something under her breath. That manipulative little snake. So Lily did send those messages? I asked. Yes, but what? Ethan never asked you to buy him a car. I let that sit for a moment. Did he tell Lily he thinks I lack ambition? Another silence. Shorter this time. He might have mentioned to his friends that he hoped marriage would motivate both of you to upgrade your lifestyle. I exhaled slowly. So he does think I'm not good enough as I am. That's not what I said. With respect, Patricia, discussing with friends that your partner needs to become more financially impressive is different from normal wedding nerves. Natalie, please, let's not make rash decisions. I already did. The deposits alone are over $15,000. Yes, and they're all in Ethan's name. A heavy sigh came through the phone. I'll talk to him, she said finally. We can fix this. But I already knew something she didn't. This wasn't about fixing anything. Good night, Patricia. I hung up. Then I finally sent Ethan one message. Your ex informed me you require a Mercedes to feel confident about marrying me. That tells me everything I need to know. A few seconds later, the typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. I didn't wait to read whatever he wrote. Instead, I turned off my phone and packed a small overnight bag. I stayed at Daniel's apartment for 2 days. Daniel had been my closest friend since college. He didn't ask many questions that first night, just handed me a beer and said, Talk when you're ready. By Wednesday evening, I felt calm enough to return home, or at least calm enough to deal with whatever waited there. I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside, and immediately realized this wasn't going to be a quiet conversation, because the living room was full. Ethan stood near the couch. Next to him was Lily. Beside her stood Ethan's younger sister, Amanda, and seated in my armchair like a tired referee was Patricia. The moment Ethan saw me, he stood up. His eyes were red, and within 2 seconds, he started crying. Not quiet tears, full, dramatic sobbing. How could you do this to me? I closed the door behind me and set my bag down. You humiliated me in front of every vendor in the city. You humiliated me first, I said calmly. When you told your friends I wasn't good enough. I never said that, he snapped. Lily immediately jumped in. She never said that either. You're twisting everything. I pulled out my phone. You literally texted me saying Ethan needed a Mercedes to feel secure about the wedding. I was exaggerating, she said. Girls talk like that. You don't understand how emotional wedding planning gets. Amanda stepped forward. Natalie, do you even realize how much money Ethan just lost? The venue alone was $8,500. I shrugged slightly. Maybe he should have thought about that before trying to extort me. That's where Patricia stood up and raised her hands. Everyone calm down. Then she looked at me. Natalie, please, let's just reschedule everything. This is clearly a misunderstanding. It's not Ethan. Ethan wiped his face angrily. I never asked you to buy me a car. But you wished I were more ambitious, I replied. He froze. How did you... Your mother... Patricia looked slightly embarrassed. I crossed my arms. What exactly does that mean, Ethan? More ambitious? He hesitated. Well, you've had the same job for 3 years. I've received 2 promotions in those 3 years, and the same apartment for 4. It's a good apartment, and the same car. I stared at him. My car is paid off. You're missing the point, he said. What point? That you're not trying to improve. I blinked. My salary increased from $62,000 to $78,000. I save over $1,500 every month. But because I don't blow money on luxury cars, I'm not ambitious? That's not what I meant, he said weakly. Then what did you mean? Silence filled the room. Finally, Lily stepped forward again. Look, this is getting ridiculous. She pointed at me. Just buy the car and fix this. I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound surprised even me. Amanda looked horrified. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's revealing. Ethan's expression hardened. If you don't fix this, he said slowly, I'm suing you for the deposits. The room went very still. My cousin Brad is a lawyer, he continued. He says since you canceled everything, you're responsible. I tilted my head. You already contacted a lawyer? Yes. Good. Ethan frowned. Good? Yes, I said calmly. Because I have Lily's texts, clearly stating I needed to buy you a car or the wedding wouldn't happen. That's extortion. Which is why I listed financial extortion concerns as the cancellation reason with every vendor. The silence this time was absolute. Then Ethan whispered, You told everyone that? Yes. Lily's face turned pale. The confrontation was over, but the real war was only beginning. The next morning, I woke up to find my car keyed. Deep scratches carved across the entire driver's side. No cameras in the parking lot. No proof. But I had a very strong suspicion who was responsible. And that was just the beginning. Because by noon, Ethan had started a social media war. By noon the next day, the situation had escalated far beyond a broken engagement. Ethan had started a social media war. It began with a long post on Instagram. I didn't see it immediately. Daniel did. He walked into the kitchen where I was making coffee and slid his phone across the counter toward me. You might want to read this. The post was long, dramatic, carefully written to make him look like the wounded party. Some people can't handle strong men with standards. Dodged a bullet, marrying someone manipulative who twists your words and destroys your reputation. Financial control and emotional abuse come in many forms. I scrolled through the comments. They came quickly. Most of them from Ethan's friends. Stay strong, man. She sounds toxic. Gold diggers hate accountability. Someone even wrote, Women like that trap good guys with wedding deposits, then run away when they get called out. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I sighed. People really believe anything, Daniel said. They're only hearing one side. I took a sip of coffee, then opened my own Instagram. I didn't write a long explanation. I didn't insult Ethan. I simply posted screenshots of Lily's texts. Every single one, including the message that said, if you really love him, you should buy the Mercedes. And the one that said, otherwise, I don't know if this wedding is happening. And my personal favorite, a real woman would have just bought the car. I posted them with a single caption, for clarity. That was it. Within 20 minutes, the comment section changed completely. People started asking questions. Then more screenshots started appearing in the replies. Apparently, Lily had a reputation. One of Ethan's friends commented, wait, she told my girlfriend something similar about engagement rings last year. Another person wrote, didn't Lily also start that rumor about Mark cheating? The narrative shifted quickly, but Ethan wasn't finished. Friday morning, I woke up to an email. The subject line read, legal notice. The sender was Brad Carter, Ethan's cousin, the lawyer. The email was long and aggressively written. It demanded that I pay $15,000 for lost wedding deposits, $5,000 for emotional distress, $5,000 for reputational damage. Total demanded $25,000. The email ended with a sentence that almost made me laugh. Failure to comply may result in immediate legal action. I forwarded the email to my friend Michael. Michael wasn't Ethan's cousin. Michael was an actual attorney. We had met during a volunteer project years ago and stayed friends. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. I answered. Michael was laughing. Not chuckling, actually laughing. Please tell me this is real. It's real, I said. Emotional distress because he tried to extort you for a Mercedes, he said. This is the easiest response letter I've written all year. So that means good news? It means Brad just made a very expensive mistake. 2 hours later, Michael sent me a copy of the reply he emailed. It was beautiful. The letter calmly cited state extortion laws. It included Lily's text messages as evidence. It pointed out that Ethan voluntarily placed every deposit in his own name, assuming the financial risk. Then it addressed the social media posts. Michael wrote, public statements accusing my client of financial abuse may constitute defamation. The final paragraph read, any further communication regarding this matter must be directed to my office. Continued harassment will result in immediate legal action. Brad never replied, not once. Apparently, his law firm didn't appreciate him sending threatening letters for family drama. Michael later told me Brad's boss had already contacted him about it. But Ethan still wasn't done. Saturday night, I was watching a basketball game at Daniel's apartment when my phone rang again. This time, it was my mom. Natalie, she said immediately, you need to know something. What happened? Ethan just came to the house. My stomach tightened slightly. What did he want? He was crying. Said you ruined his life over a misunderstanding. That sounds like Ethan. He said he still loves you. I leaned back on the couch. Mom, he expected me to buy him a Mercedes to prove I'm worthy of marriage. He told us Lily suggested that idea, she said. But he didn't stop her, did he? No. Then he agreed with it. My mom sighed. You know your father and I got married with nothing. I know. You know what car we drove when we got married? I smiled slightly. The blue Honda. The one with 150,000 miles, she said. Exactly. Because marriage is about building a life together, not proving something to Instagram. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. What did Ethan say when you told him that? He said times are different now. And what did you say? I told him love isn't. There was a pause. Then she said quietly, I asked him to leave. The next day, something unexpected happened. Ethan's father, Frank Carter, called me. Frank had always been a quiet man, but also a fair one. Natalie, he said, I'm not calling to change your mind. I appreciate that. I just want to understand what happened. So I sent him the screenshots, all of them. An hour later, my phone rang again. Frank sounded furious. Jesus Christ. Yeah. She really said that? Yep. And Ethan knew? Yes. He exhaled slowly. I'm pulling my financial contribution to the wedding. All of it. That money was meant for my son to marry a good woman, not to shake her down for a luxury car. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. You remind me of myself at your age, Frank continued. Work hard, save money, don't show off. That's how you build wealth. Ethan got caught up in that Instagram nonsense, comparing himself to friends. Madison's husband bought her a Tesla. Chloe got a Lexus. He felt left behind. So this was never about me, I said. No, Frank replied. It was about status. Monday morning, things escalated again. When I arrived at work, HR was waiting for me. Natalie, the manager said gently, we've received some concerning messages about you through the company Facebook page. My stomach dropped. She turned the monitor toward me. Someone had sent my employer a message claiming I was financially abusive and manipulative. The message warned them about having someone like me in a management role. I closed my eyes briefly. Let me guess, I said. My ex-boyfriend or his friends. Do you have any context for this situation? HR asked. I handed her my phone and showed her Lily's texts. Her eyebrows rose higher with every message. She tried to extort you for a car? Pretty much. HR nodded slowly. We'll document this in case the harassment continues, and we'll respond that this appears to be a personal matter unrelated to your employment. I thanked her. But as I walked back to my desk, I realized something important. Ethan and Lily weren't just embarrassed. They were panicking because the truth had started spreading. And once the truth spreads, it's very difficult to control. But the most ridiculous moment of the entire situation happened that afternoon because Lily showed up at my apartment. Lily showed up at my apartment that afternoon like nothing had happened. I opened the door and stared at her for a moment. She was standing there in oversized sunglasses, arms crossed, looking impatient. We need to talk, she said. No, I replied calmly. We really don't. She sighed dramatically and pushed the sunglasses up into her hair. I'm trying to fix this. You already fixed it, I said. You destroyed the wedding. Mission accomplished. Her jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. I leaned against the door frame. You told me to buy Ethan a $45,000 Mercedes or the wedding might not happen. I was exaggerating. You wrote it 3 different times. That's how people talk when they're stressed. No, I said quietly. That's how people talk when they think someone else's money belongs to them. She huffed. Look, maybe the Mercedes was a little much. Oh? Just buy him something smaller. I blinked. Smaller. Yeah, she continued quickly, like a nice watch or expensive jewelry, something that proves you care. I stared at her. For a second, I wondered if she truly didn't understand the problem, or if she was simply incapable of admitting it. Lily, I said slowly, do you actually believe this is about money? Well, obviously it is. No, I said. It's about the fact that Ethan believed my love needed to come with a luxury purchase. That's not what he meant. Then what did he mean? She hesitated. It's about security. I have a stable career. It's about showing him you can provide. I make good money. But how is he supposed to know that if you don't show it? I folded my arms. By trusting me. By looking at 4 years of actions. By having an adult conversation about finances instead of sending his ex-girlfriend to pressure me. Her foot actually stomped against the ground like a frustrated child. You are impossible, and you're throwing away something beautiful over pride. I shook my head slowly. I'm walking away from something transactional that was pretending to be love. She stared at me for another moment. Then she spun around and stormed down the hallway, but not before shouting loud enough for my neighbors to hear. You'll die alone with that stupid Camry. I closed the door. The Camry was paid off, and it got excellent gas mileage. So honestly, I wasn't too worried. 3 weeks passed, and the consequences of everything finally settled into place. Ethan ended up losing $15,700 in deposits because every vendor contract had been under his name. His father, Frank, refused to help him pay for it. Frank's exact words were, "Actions have consequences." Ethan had to take out a personal loan to pay off the credit cards he used. The wedding venue actually called me a week later. They had another couple interested in our date, but they needed both parties to sign off to release the contract. I agreed immediately. Ethan tried to hold out for 3 days, hoping to negotiate a refund. Eventually, the venue gave him $500 back. out of $8,500. He texted me angrily afterward. "You could have backed me up." I didn't respond. Meanwhile, Lily's reputation completely collapsed. Once people saw the screenshots of her texts, stories started surfacing. Apparently, she had a long history of stirring up drama. Madison revealed Lily once told her fiancé she was unhappy with her engagement ring. Chloe said Lily tried convincing her that her husband was cheating. He wasn't. Within a week, their entire friend group had cut Lily off. Even Ethan stopped speaking to her. Brad, the cousin lawyer, also had problems. Michael later told me Brad's boss discovered the threatening email he sent me. Using the firm's letterhead for personal family arguments did not go over well. Apparently, Brad received a very serious warning. 2 days ago, Ethan made one final attempt. He showed up at my apartment holding a cardboard box. Inside were random things that had been at his place. Old t-shirts, a coffee mug, a book I didn't even remember owning. He looked carefully put together. "Nice shirt. Cologne I bought him last Christmas." "Natalie," he said quietly, "I just wanted to return your things." "Thanks," I said. "You can leave them there." He placed the box on the floor, then hesitated. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "About what?" I messed up. "How?" I let Lily get in my head. And I let Instagram comparisons ruin what we had. I studied his face. For a moment, he looked sincere. "I love you," he continued softly. "Not your money, not a car. You." I nodded slowly. "If that were true," I said, "you would have shut Lily down the moment she suggested the Mercedes." I was confused. "You knew she was texting me." His eyes widened slightly. "You admitted that the first night." He didn't answer. "You let her do your dirty work," I continued, "so you could pretend you weren't involved." "That's not true." "Then why did your first text say, 'If this is about Lily, I can explain'?" Silence. The truth hung between us. Finally, he spoke. "I thought if you bought the car, it would mean you really loved me." I shook my head. "No." "You thought if I bought the car, you could post pictures on Instagram." He didn't deny it. Instead, he looked down at the floor. "I'm turning 30 next year," he said quietly. "All my friends are married. They all have nice things. I just wanted to feel special." I softened slightly. "You were special. You were about to marry someone who loved you. But that wasn't enough." He wiped his face. "You're right. It wasn't about the car. It was about what the car represented. Status." I nodded. "That's the problem." He left a few minutes later without another word. Yesterday, Daniel sent me something funny. A screenshot from Instagram. Ethan had posted a picture of himself with a motivational quote, "Know your worth. Never settle for less." The top comment came from his own father. Frank had written, "Focus less on what you deserve and more on what you earn." Savage. As for me, life is good. The $1,500 a month I was saving before the wedding is still going into my investment account. Actually, more now. Because weddings are expensive. Michael and I have started looking into investment properties. Turns out, having good credit and savings makes that possible. Who knew? And something else interesting happened last weekend. I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, Natalie. This is Madison. I wanted to apologize for believing Ethan's version at first. Also, my brother Ryan is single. He thinks what you did was pretty impressive. Would it be?" I stared at the message for a moment, then smiled. Yes, Ryan and I had coffee on Saturday. He drives a 2015 Honda Civic, and he thinks expensive cars are a waste of money that could go toward traveling. We talked for 3 hours. He even showed me a spreadsheet of his 5-year financial plan. I'm not saying I'm in love, but I'm definitely intrigued. The best revenge isn't luxury, it's living well. And I'm living exactly the way I always planned. Comfortably, responsibly, and very happily. No Mercedes required. My name is Brinley Marie Hartford. I'm 28 years old. And that afternoon, with a pen trembling slightly between my fingers, I did something my entire family would never expect. I bought a house. Not just any house. A beautiful 3-bedroom Craftsman tucked in the quiet heart of Riverside Heights. It had a wraparound porch that creaked softly when you walked across the old boards, original hardwood floors that gleamed like honey in the afternoon sun, and a kitchen so charming it looked like it belonged in one of those home magazines people leave on coffee tables to pretend they have their lives together. The moment I saw the listing photos, something inside me shifted. It felt like destiny, or maybe stubborn determination. Because if there was one thing about growing up a Hartford, it was this. No one ever expected me to aim that high. And here's the most important part of this story. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents. Not my brother James, not my sister Paige, not even my best friend Savannah, who had been part of my life since we bonded over terrible cafeteria pizza in 7th grade. The house was my secret, my sanctuary, my quiet little rebellion. Growing up as the middle child in the Hartford family meant living permanently in someone else's shadow. James, my older brother, was the golden boy, high school quarterback. Business degree from Northwestern, now running my dad's construction company like he had been born wearing a hard hat. He married his college sweetheart Amber, who had the kind of smile that made strangers trust her instantly, and the kind of charm that made my parents adore her. Then there was Paige, my younger sister, the artistic one, currently pursuing an MFA in Chicago while my parents happily paid her rent, tuition, and probably the occasional overpriced latte. And then there was me. Just Brinley, the practical one, the one who worked 2 jobs through community college, the one who clipped coupons and tracked expenses in spreadsheets, the one who never asked for help because deep down, I already knew what the answer would be. While James got a generous down payment gift for his first house, and Paige received years of tuition support, I got lectures. Long lectures about responsibility, about budgeting, about how important it was to live within my means. So when I finally saved enough money for a down payment, after 5 years of working as a dental hygienist while also running a small photography business on weekends, I made a quiet promise to myself. I was going to prove something, not to them, to me. I found the perfect house, got pre-approved for a mortgage, and made an offer without telling a single soul. The seller, Mrs. Kellerman, was moving to Florida to live closer to her grandchildren. She had lived in the house for 40 years, raised her children there, hosted birthday parties in the backyard, watched Christmas mornings unfold beside the living room fireplace. During the walkthrough, she spoke softly, almost like she was telling secrets. The kitchen window, she said, pointing toward the sink, is the best place in the house. You can see the neighborhood kids walking to school every morning. Her voice trembled a little. This house needs a family again. On closing day, she pressed the keys into my hand and smiled warmly. I think it's been waiting for the right person. For the next 3 months, I lived a double life. After work, I would drive to Maple Ridge Drive, sometimes just to sit on the porch swing while the sky melted into shades of pink and orange. I furnished the house slowly, carefully. A vintage couch I saved 3 months to buy. Soft lamps that made the living room glow like warm candlelight. Floating shelves for my photography prints. I planted tulip bulbs in the flower beds. Hung string lights in the backyard. And eventually, I adopted a rescue cat. A fluffy orange tabby I named Muffin, who seemed to understand that our little world was something fragile and special. The plan had been simple. I would live quietly for a few months. Then during Christmas dinner, I would casually mention my new house. I imagined their faces when they realized their irresponsible daughter had done something they never believed she could. But life rarely respects careful plans. It was a Tuesday morning in late October when everything started to unravel. I was at work cleaning Mrs. Patterson's teeth while she complained about her son-in-law's table manners, when my phone buzzed with a notification. Security camera alert. Yes, I installed cameras. I'm a single woman living alone who watches way too many true crime documentaries. Better safe than sorry. Normally I ignored the alerts during work, but something made me glance at the screen. The moment I did, my blood turned to ice. Standing clearly on my front porch was my mother. And she wasn't alone. Next to her stood Amber, my brother's wife, and beside them was a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, elegant coat, professional posture. My mother reached into her purse, pulled out a key, and unlocked my front door. I stared at the screen in disbelief as the 3 women stepped inside my house. The timestamp said they had already been there 7 minutes. My heart began hammering so hard I thought Mrs. Patterson might hear it over the dental equipment. "Mrs. Patterson?" I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm so sorry, but I have a family emergency. We'll need to reschedule." I left the clinic 5 minutes later and drove home like a woman possessed. Questions crashed through my mind. How did she get a key? How did she even know about the house? And why? Why was she giving strangers a tour? By the time I arrived at Maple Ridge Drive, the driveway was empty, but the damage was already done. The front door sat slightly open. Inside, the house felt disturbed. Cabinets open, furniture moved, the refrigerator door left ajar, and on the kitchen counter, a note, written in my mother's familiar handwriting. "Brinley, honey, I know you're upset, but this is for the best. Amber and Denise, my realtor friend, think this place has real potential. We'll talk tonight. Love, Mom." My hands began to shake because suddenly I understood something terrifying. My family didn't just discover my house. They thought they had the right to decide what happened to it. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let them. I called my mother the second I finished reading the note. She answered on the first ring, bright and cheerful, like she had just dropped off a casserole instead of violated every boundary I had. "Oh, good, sweetheart. You got my note." My voice came out low and sharp. "How did you get a key to my house?" There was a tiny pause. Not guilt, more like annoyance that I wasn't opening with gratitude. "Well, Mrs. Kellerman's daughter is in my book club," she said. "When she mentioned selling to a young Hartford girl, I put 2 and 2 together. I've been worried sick about you living alone in that neighborhood." I looked around my kitchen, at the pale blue tiles I had scrubbed myself, at the fruit bowl I had placed just so on the counter, at the life I had built in careful, private pieces. "That neighborhood is one of the nicest in town." "That's not the point." "No," I said. "The point is that you got a key to my house without asking me and let yourself in." Amber's name pulsed in my head. Denise. Real potential. My stomach turned. "And what exactly were you doing giving a realtor a tour?" My mother sighed, the way she used to when I was 16 and insisted on choosing my own clothes for school pictures. "Amber mentioned that she and James might be interested in an investment property, and Denise knows the market better than anyone. I was simply helping you understand your options." "My options?" I repeated. "You mean my options for a house I already bought with my own money?" "Brinley, don't take that tone with me. You made a very large decision in secret. Naturally, your father and I are concerned." There it was. Concern. That soft, respectable word my family used whenever they wanted to disguise control as love. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Or maybe something I should have said years ago. That evening, my phone exploded with calls. First Mom. Then James. Then Dad, leaving his usual careful voicemail in the tone he used whenever he wanted everyone to be reasonable. "Let's all calm down and talk this through." Talk it through. As if there was any confusion. As if I had somehow misunderstood the sight of my mother unlocking my front door and bringing strangers into my home. I ignored every call. Then I sat at my kitchen table with Muffin curled in my lap and searched for a locksmith. The next morning, James showed up at my work. I had just finished with a patient and was updating a chart when I looked up and saw him standing near the reception desk, in pressed khakis and a pale blue button-down, looking like the human embodiment of calm authority. He still had the same dark hair and green eyes we'd inherited from Dad, still had that polished, confident presence that made people assume he belonged wherever he stood. "Bryn," he said quietly as I stepped into the hallway. "We need to talk." "Not here. It'll only take a minute." I folded my arms. "Then take your minute." He exhaled, glancing toward the waiting room before lowering his voice. "Mom told me what happened. Look, I didn't know she was going to go over there like that. But you knew about the house." A flicker passed across his face. "Mom figured it out about a month ago." The words hit me harder than I expected. A month. "She said you'd been acting secretive. She asked if I knew anything, and I told her to leave it alone. Clearly she listened." "Brinley." His jaw tightened. She was worried about you. That sentence nearly made me laugh, not because it was funny, because it was so painfully predictable. You all keep using that word like it excuses everything. He stepped closer. You bought a house without telling anyone. That's not exactly normal. Normal for who? For family. I stared at him. That word again. Family. In my family, that word had always come with fine print. For James, it meant celebration, support, backup. For Paige, it meant encouragement and tuition checks, and enthusiastic applause for every new dream. For me, it meant scrutiny, advice I didn't ask for, and the constant assumption that I was one mistake away from proving everyone right. I'm 28 years old, I said. I don't need permission to buy property. No one said permission. Oh, right, just approval, input, oversight, a committee meeting. James rubbed a hand over his face. Why are you making this so ugly? I stared at him for a long moment, because that was always how it worked, wasn't it? When they crossed a line, I was dramatic for noticing. When they dismissed me, I was sensitive for caring. When I defended myself, I was difficult. If you or Amber or Mom show up at my house uninvited again, I said evenly, I will call the police. His head snapped up. Jesus, Brinley, she's our mother, not a criminal. She broke into my house with a key I didn't give her. She wasn't breaking in. She entered my home without my permission, I said. What would you call it if a stranger did that? He had no answer. The waiting room had gone too quiet. I could feel the receptionist pretending not to listen. I have patience, I said. We're done. As I turned away, I caught the look on his face. Frustration, disbelief, and something worse than anger. Pity, like I was behaving irrationally over a misunderstanding, instead of reacting normally to betrayal. That expression stayed with me all afternoon. By Thursday morning, the locksmith arrived. His name was Jonathan from Secure Solutions, and he had the practical, no-nonsense energy of a man who had seen every kind of domestic chaos. When I explained, carefully, that there had been a family boundary issue, he nodded like I'd told him the weather forecast. Family disputes are always the messiest, he said, kneeling by the front door. Strangers are easier. At least strangers know they're not supposed to have keys. I almost laughed at that. By noon, I had new deadbolts, new doorknob locks, and a new lock on the back gate. Jonathan handed me the keys and gave the door one final test. Smooth as butter, he said. Good for you. Protect your space. Protect your space. Such a simple sentence. But standing there in the doorway of my own house, holding keys that only I possessed, I felt something strange and powerful settle inside me. Not anger, not relief, something firmer, like the first brick in a wall I should have built years ago. The fallout came faster than I expected. Thursday evening, just after 7, someone began pounding on my front door. Bryn, my mother's voice cut through the house like a blade. I was curled on the couch with muffin in my lap, a mug of tea cooling untouched on the coffee table. I didn't move. Open this door right now. The pounding came again, followed by a furious jab at the doorbell. I stood and crossed to the window, just enough to see her on the porch, face flushed, purse hanging off one shoulder, the old spare key gripped uselessly in her hand. My phone rang. Mom? Of course. I answered but didn't unlock anything. Yes? Open the door. We can talk like this. Through a phone while I'm standing outside like a stranger? Strangers usually call first. Her breathing sharpened. Normal daughters do not change the locks to keep their mothers out. Normal mothers do not let themselves into houses they don't own. Silence. For one hopeful second, I thought maybe the truth of that had finally landed. Then I heard her switch tactics, her voice softening into wounded concern. Honey, I know you're upset, but this is getting ridiculous. That house is too much for someone in your position. I closed my eyes. There it was again, that phrase, someone in your position, as if I were still 15, still temporary, still almost adult, still not someone whose decisions could be trusted. My position? You know what I mean. You're doing well, sweetheart, but this house is ambitious. The mortgage alone must be enormous. James and Amber could help if you rented it to them. Or if the market is strong right now, you could sell and make a profit. Buy something more appropriate. Appropriate. That word landed like a slap. All my life, people had praised me in ways that quietly cut me down. My career was appropriate. My apartment was appropriate. My car was appropriate. Practical, modest, manageable, never impressive, never bold, never beautiful. As if the world had decided long ago what kind of life suited me, and anything beyond that was indulgence. This house is not for sale, I said, and I'm not renting it to anyone. Brinley, no. Her tone hardened instantly. You are being stubborn and short-sighted. This is exactly the kind of impulsive decision your father and I worry about. I let out a slow breath and looked around my living room. The lamp in the corner cast a warm amber pool across the hardwood floor. My framed photographs lined the mantel. Muffin had jumped onto the windowsill and was glaring at the silhouette on the porch, like he personally disapproved of all family drama. For the first time, this house didn't feel fragile. It felt like mine. I am not shutting my family out, I said quietly. I'm setting boundaries. Boundaries? She repeated, like the word itself was offensive. Yes. If you want to come here, you call first. You ask. And if I say no, you accept it. The porch went still. When she spoke again, her voice had gone cold. Fine, have it your way, but don't come crying to us when this becomes too much for you. She hung up. A moment later, I watched through the curtain as she turned sharply, marched down the steps, and disappeared into Dad's pickup. Her tires screeched slightly as she pulled away. The silence afterward felt enormous. I should have felt victorious, strong, triumphant. Instead, I stood in the middle of my living room with my phone in one hand and tears stinging my eyes, feeling the full cost of what I had just done. Because sometimes choosing yourself doesn't feel empowering at first. Sometimes it just feels lonely. And over the next 2 weeks, that loneliness settled into every room of the house. The next 2 weeks were some of the quietest days of my life. Not peaceful quiet, heavy quiet. The kind that settles into a house and echoes in places where voices used to be. Mom didn't call. James didn't text. Even Paige, who usually floated above family drama like a curious observer in a museum, sent only a short message. Heard about the house situation. Maybe just apologize and move on. Apologize for buying a house, for locking my own doors, for wanting privacy. I read the message 3 times before setting my phone face down on the kitchen counter. Muffin blinked at me from the windowsill as if to say, humans are exhausting. I threw myself into projects. If loneliness wanted to move into Maple Ridge Drive, it was going to have to squeeze around paint cans and power tools. I painted the guest bedroom a soft lavender, installed floating shelves in the living room, spent an entire Saturday carefully hanging the gallery wall of photographs I had been planning for months. Each image had a story. Sunlight through autumn leaves. An old couple holding hands in a park. Savannah laughing with her head thrown back at one of our disastrous camping trips. It felt good to claim the walls, to build something beautiful in a space that belonged to me. But even while I worked, the silence followed me. It was there when I ate dinner alone at the kitchen island. There when I watered the small vegetable garden in the backyard. There when I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if independence was supposed to feel this hollow. That was when Savannah showed up. She arrived on a Friday evening, carrying a paper bag from Luigi's Italian restaurant and a bottle of wine, like she was leading a rescue mission. Okay, she said the moment she stepped inside. Explain. She kicked off her shoes, plopped onto my living room floor, and opened the takeout containers with efficient determination. I had to hear from my hairdresser's cousin, who works at the title company, that you bought a house and started a civil war with the Hartford family, she said. As your best friend, I find this deeply offensive. I handed her a plate and sank down across from her. I wasn't trying to start a war. Well, congratulations. You still managed it. Savannah had been my closest friend since 7th grade. She was the only person who had never made me feel like I needed to apologize for existing, which was probably why I had avoided telling her about the house. Because Savannah always asked the questions that actually mattered. You should see this place, she said, between bites of chicken parmesan. Seriously, it's gorgeous. I walked through your living room and almost fainted from pride. I smiled faintly. Then the smile faded. They don't respect me, I said quietly. Savannah's fork paused midair. Mom got a key to my house through someone else's daughter and gave tours like it was her property. James thought it was reasonable for them to discuss my finances behind my back. And Dad just wants everyone to calm down and compromise. Savannah chewed thoughtfully. So what's the plan? What plan? Your end game. Are you cutting them off forever? Writing a memoir about your tragic childhood? Running away to Portugal to open a bakery? Despite everything, I laughed. I don't know. And that was the truth. 3 days later, something happened that changed everything again. I was walking out of the dental clinic after work when I noticed a familiar truck parked near the curb. James's Chevy Silverado. My stomach tightened. For a moment, I considered walking the other direction. But when the driver's window rolled down, it wasn't James behind the wheel. It was Amber. My sister-in-law gave a small, uncertain smile. Can we talk? Amber and I had always maintained a polite distance. She was effortlessly social. Blonde, charming, the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday and somehow always looked perfectly put together. At family dinners, she had a way of leaning toward James, laughing at his jokes, making him feel like the center of the room. We had never had a real conversation beyond surface-level pleasantries. If this is about the house situation, I said carefully. It is, she interrupted gently, but probably not the way you think. She nodded toward the passenger seat. 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I got in. Amber didn't start the engine. Instead, she turned in her seat and faced me. For a moment, she looked like she might change her mind. Then she said something that completely caught me off guard. I owe you an apology. I blinked. A big one, she added quietly. That wasn't what I expected. James doesn't know I'm here, she said quickly. And honestly, he'd probably be furious if he did. But I can't let this keep going without telling you the truth. My chest tightened. What truth? Amber took a slow breath. Your mom didn't just randomly decide to show me your house. Something in her expression made my stomach drop. I asked her to. For a moment, the words didn't register. You... what? Not that she rubbed her forehead, clearly nervous. James and I have been having problems. What kind of problems? That answer stunned me. James? The golden boy with the successful construction company and the perfect suburban life? Amber continued, her voice low. His dad's business is struggling more than anyone wants to admit. The market slowed down this year, projects got delayed, and suddenly we're behind on our mortgage. That doesn't make sense. James runs the company. Yes, she said quietly, which means he also carries the pressure of pretending everything is fine. When your mom mentioned that you bought a house, Amber continued, I swear I didn't know you were keeping it secret. I just got this desperate idea. I thought maybe you might be willing to rent out a room or let us stay temporarily if things got worse. My heart sank. So you asked Mom to show you the house. I asked if she thought you might consider roommates, Amber said quickly. She said she'd talk to you. I had no idea she was going to break in with a realtor. We sat there in silence for a moment. The truth felt complicated and uncomfortable because anger was easier when the story was simple. Why didn't James just ask me? I asked quietly. Amber let out a small, tired laugh. Pride. Of course. He's supposed to be the successful one, she continued. The one who has everything under control. Asking his little sister for help would mean admitting he doesn't. Little sister. Even Amber saw me that way. I stared at the steering wheel for a moment. Then I said softly, I'm not little anymore. Amber looked at me differently then. Really looked. She noticed the work badge clipped to my scrubs, the camera bag in the back seat of my car, the quiet evidence of a life I had built on my own. No, she said gently. You're really not. She hesitated, then added something that surprised me even more. For what it's worth, your house is beautiful. No one in my family had said that yet. Not once. That night, I sat on the porch swing at Maple Ridge Drive long after the sun had set. The string lights glowed softly in the backyard. Muffin curled beside me like a tiny orange loaf. And I thought about what Amber had told me. About pride. About fear. About the fragile illusion that some people were always successful, while others were always struggling. By the time the porch lights of neighboring houses began to switch off one by one, I had made a decision. A decision that surprised even me. The next morning, I sent a group text. Family dinner at my place, Sunday at 6. Dress casual. I'm cooking. The replies came immediately. Confused emojis, question marks, tentative confirmations. Mom called twice. I didn't answer. I had a dinner to prepare. And something told me this dinner was about to change everything. Sunday arrived faster than I expected. By late afternoon, the house smelled like garlic, tomato sauce, and freshly baked bread. The lasagna was cooling on the counter, layers of cheese bubbling gently beneath the foil. A bowl of salad waited in the refrigerator, and a small basket of vegetables from my backyard garden sat proudly in the center of the dining table. I checked the clock again. 5:47 p.m. My stomach twisted with nerves. For the past 2 days, I had thrown myself into preparing the dinner like it was a complicated art project. Cooking helped keep my mind busy, because whenever I slowed down, doubts crept in. Was this a terrible idea? Was I about to restart a fight that had barely cooled down? Or maybe this dinner was exactly what we needed. Outside the front window, the soft golden light of early evening stretched across Maple Ridge Drive. The neighborhood looked calm and welcoming, nothing like the battlefield my mind kept imagining. Muffin sat on the windowsill, tail flicking slowly as he watched a squirrel sprint across the yard. "You better behave tonight," I told him. He blinked lazily. At 5:58 p.m., the first vehicle turned into the driveway. Dad's old Ford pickup truck. I watched from the kitchen window as Mom climbed out of the passenger seat. She stood for a moment beside the truck, smoothing the front of her sweater like someone preparing for a job interview. Dad circled around the truck quietly. Neither of them moved toward the house right away. 2 minutes later, the familiar rumble of James's Silverado pulled in behind them. James stepped out first. Amber followed, carrying a bottle of wine in one hand and offering me a small, nervous smile when she spotted me through the window. Finally, a smaller car turned the corner and parked along the curb. Paige's battered Subaru. My younger sister climbed out, curly hair escaping from a messy bun as she shoved her hands into the pockets of her oversized sweater. For a moment, they all stood in the driveway. 5 people, 1 house, and years of unresolved emotions hovering in the air between them. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the door. Before anyone could knock, I opened it. "Welcome to my home," I said. For a second, no one moved. Then Dad stepped forward first. "Well," he said slowly, "this is something." Mom gave me a cautious look before walking inside. James and Amber followed. Paige lingered a moment longer, glancing around the porch with open curiosity. "This place already has better vibes than our parents' house," she muttered, before stepping inside. I couldn't help smiling. The tour I gave them that evening was very different from the one Mom had conducted without permission. I walked them through every room myself. The living room came first. Dad immediately noticed the restored fireplace mantel. He ran his hand along the wood, examining the craftsmanship with the trained eye of a contractor. "This is original oak," he murmured. "You don't see work like this anymore." I felt a small flicker of pride. Mrs. Kellerman restored it about 10 years ago. Mom moved slowly through the space, studying the furniture, the framed photographs on the walls, the shelves I had installed myself. Paige wandered toward the gallery wall and tilted her head. "You took these?" she asked. "Most of them." "They're actually really good," she said, sounding genuinely impressed. Coming from Paige, the family artist, that was practically a standing ovation. James had remained quiet until we reached the kitchen. He leaned against the counter and looked around. "Brinley," he said finally, "this place is incredible." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had imagined this moment so many times, but hearing the words out loud still felt surreal. Amber opened the bottle of wine and poured glasses for everyone, while I finished preparing dinner. Soon we were seated around the dining table. Lasagna, garlic bread, salad, simple food. but the atmosphere felt heavier than any holiday dinner we'd ever had. For a while, the conversation stayed safe. Compliments about the food, questions about the neighborhood, comments about the weather. Finally, Mom cleared her throat. "Brinley," she said gently, "why didn't you tell us?" The question hung in the air. Everyone looked at me. I set my fork down because I wanted to do it myself. "That doesn't make sense," Mom said. "We could have helped." I met her eyes. "That's exactly why." Silence settled over the table. I took a breath. Every time I've made a decision in my life, someone in this family has had an opinion about how I should do it better. James shifted slightly in his chair. "Brinley, let me finish." I looked around the table. "James, when I started my photography business, what did you call it?" His eyes dropped. "A hobby," he admitted quietly. "Dad," I continued, "when I got promoted to lead hygienist, what did you say?" Dad frowned, clearly remembering. "I said it was good experience. For when I decided to do something more serious," I finished. Mom looked down at her plate. "And when I bought my car," I said softly, "you spent an hour explaining why a sedan would have been more practical than the Jeep I chose." No one spoke. "I love you all," I said, "but I needed to prove something to myself." My voice trembled slightly. I needed one thing that was completely mine. Amber cleared her throat. "I owe you an apology too," she said suddenly. Everyone turned toward her. "About the house." James frowned. "What about the house?" Amber looked nervous but determined. "I asked your mom about it first." James blinked. "You did what?" She explained everything. The financial stress, the mortgage pressure, the idea of possibly renting a room. The moment she realized the situation had spiraled out of control. By the time she finished, the room had gone very quiet. James stared at the table. Finally, he spoke. "The company's been struggling," he admitted. It was the first time I had ever heard uncertainty in my brother's voice. "The market slowed down. Projects stalled. I thought things would recover faster." Amber reached for his hand. "We're managing," she said softly, "but it's been stressful." For the first time in my life, I looked at James without seeing the golden boy. I saw the exhaustion around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the quiet fear of someone who had spent his whole life pretending to have everything under control. "If you need help," I said carefully. "We don't," James started automatically. Then he stopped. "Old habits." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Sorry." I leaned forward. "If you ever need help," I repeated, "you ask me directly. Not through Mom, not through anyone else." He nodded slowly. "And you respect whatever answer I give." "Deal," he said. Then I turned to Mom. "And you." She looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm not angry because you were trying to help," I said. "I'm angry because you didn't trust me to know what I needed." Her voice trembled. "I was worried." "I know," I said gently. "But getting a key to my house and bringing strangers inside, that wasn't help." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted to make sure you had options." "I appreciate that," I said, "but I need you to trust that I can handle my own life." The conversation continued long after the dishes were cleared. Voices rose, tears appeared. Old frustrations surfaced, but something else was happening too. For the first time in years, we were actually being honest. And honesty, it turns out, can change everything. The conversation lasted far longer than I expected. At some point, the lasagna dishes had been cleared away, the wine bottle emptied, and everyone migrated to the living room. The house felt warmer now, softer somehow, as if the walls themselves were relaxing after weeks of tension. Mom sat on the couch beside me, twisting her napkin between her fingers. Dad leaned back in one of the armchairs, his boots stretched out in front of him like he was inspecting the place again, with quiet approval. James stood near the fireplace for a while before finally lowering himself into the other chair, shoulders still tense. Paige perched cross-legged on the floor, watching all of us like she was witnessing a rare family documentary. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Then Dad cleared his throat. "I guess I should say something," he began. Everyone turned toward him. Dad was never the loudest person in the room. In our family, he had always played the role of mediator, the man who tried to smooth over disagreements before they turned into full-blown arguments. But this time, his voice sounded different, more thoughtful. "Brinley," he said slowly, I didn't realize how much all of this had been weighing on you. I leaned back against the couch cushion. It's been building for a long time. He nodded. I suppose we've always assumed you'd be fine. That sentence might have sounded harmless to anyone else, but I understood what he meant. James had always needed guidance because he carried the family business on his shoulders. Paige needed encouragement because she followed unpredictable artistic dreams. And me? I had always been the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who figured things out without asking for help. Dad rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I think maybe we got comfortable with that, he admitted. Mom's eyes filled with fresh tears. We never meant to make you feel small, she whispered. I know, I said softly. And the truth was, I did know. Families rarely hurt each other on purpose. Most of the damage happens slowly, through habits and assumptions that nobody thinks to question. Mom reached for my hand. I really thought I was helping, she said. I believed the mortgage would be too much for you. I thought maybe James and Amber could rent it, or that selling might give you a profit. I understand that, I said. But it wasn't your decision to make. She nodded, wiping her eyes. You're right. That simple sentence carried more weight than any argument we had earlier, because my mother had never been very good at admitting she was wrong. Across the room, James shifted in his chair. I should apologize too, he said. Amber glanced at him, surprised. I shouldn't have acted like you were overreacting, he continued. When Mom told me about the locks, I thought you were being dramatic. He gave a small, embarrassed laugh. Turns out you were just protecting what's yours. I raised an eyebrow. You think? Yeah, he said with a sheepish grin. I do now. Paige leaned back on her hands. You know, she said thoughtfully, this whole situation is actually kind of inspiring. James groaned. Please don't start writing a performance piece about it. I'm serious, Paige insisted. Brindley bought a house on her own, stood up to the entire family, and forced us all into a brutally honest dinner conversation. She shrugged. That's impressive. For the first time that night, Mom laughed softly. She always was stubborn. Determined, I corrected. Dad smiled. That too. Amber, who had been quiet for a while, looked around the living room. I meant what I said earlier, she told me. You should be proud of this house. She gestured toward the walls, the shelves, the photographs. You built this life yourself. Something warm spread through my chest. It was strange how much those words meant. Not because I needed validation, but because hearing it from them felt like closing a door on years of silent doubt. Eventually, the clock on the wall crept past midnight. Mom stood up first. Well, she said gently, we should probably head home. Dad grabbed his jacket from the chair. James and Amber gathered their things while Paige stretched dramatically on the floor. Next time, she said, we're ordering pizza. I walked them all to the front door. The night air outside was cool and quiet, the streetlights casting soft pools of light along Maple Ridge Drive. Mom hugged me first. But this hug felt different from the ones we usually shared at holidays. She held me a little longer. When she pulled back, her voice was soft. I'm proud of you. The words hit me harder than I expected. I should have said that first, she added. Dad gave my shoulder a firm squeeze before heading toward the truck. James lingered near the porch steps. For a moment, we stood there awkwardly. Then he gave me a half smile. You did good, sis. It was simple, but it meant everything. Amber waved as they climbed into the Silverado. Paige shouted something about sending her the lavender paint color before driving away in her noisy Subaru. One by one, the headlights disappeared down the street. Soon the driveway was empty again. I stood on the porch for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood. Behind me, the warm light of the living room spilled through the open doorway. Inside, Muffin padded across the floor and jumped onto the couch like the house belonged entirely to him. Maybe it did. Maybe it belonged to both of us. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from James. Thanks for dinner. The house is amazing. A moment later, another text appeared. You did good, sis. I smiled. Then I stepped back inside and closed the door. That night, for the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. Because buying this house hadn't just been about independence. It had been about something deeper. About finally claiming a place where my voice mattered. Where my choices were respected, where my life belonged to me. And as I curled up on the couch with Muffin purring beside me, I realized something important. I hadn't just built a home. I had changed the way my family saw me. More importantly, I had changed the way I saw myself. And sometimes that makes all the difference in the world. My name is Marissa Lawrence. I'm 30 years old and I work as a freelance wildlife photographer. Until about a year ago, I thought my life was relatively simple. I traveled. I photographed animals in forests and mountains. I built a career capturing moments of quiet beauty most people never got to see. And I believed my mother and I had a reasonably good relationship. Not perfect, but functional. Looking back now, I realize I misunderstood something very important about my mother. She believes every problem in the world can be solved through communication and compromise. That sounds reasonable at first, until you realize she applies that philosophy to situations where compromise is actually dangerous, like stalking. I met Raymond Hammond 3 years ago at a photography gallery in Chicago. I had several wildlife prints displayed that night: wolves in Yellowstone, bald eagles in Alaska, a black bear emerging from mist at sunrise. Raymond approached me while I was explaining camera lenses to a group of visitors. "You took these?" he asked. His voice was warm, friendly. He looked like someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. Broad shoulders, sun-touched skin, dark hair slightly messy like he'd just come in from the wind. When I nodded, he smiled. "They're incredible." That smile worked on me. I'll admit it. He asked intelligent questions about photography. He knew about cameras. He even recognized some of the national parks where I'd taken the shots. When he asked me to dinner a few days later, it didn't feel strange. It felt exciting. The first few weeks were good, really good. Raymond was attentive, charming, passionate about the same outdoor spaces I loved. My friends were jealous. Natalie, my best friend since college, joked that I'd finally found a guy rugged enough to keep up with me on hiking trails. But somewhere around week 4, the cracks started showing. At first it was small things. A lot of texts, then more texts, then dozens. If I didn't respond within 10 minutes, my phone would light up again. "Everything okay? You there? Did I say something wrong?" At first I thought it was sweet. Then it became exhausting. He wanted to know where I was all the time, who I was with, when I'd be home. If I mentioned a cafe once in conversation, he'd suddenly happen to be there the next day. "Oh, wow," he'd say, smiling. "Small world." Except Chicago isn't a small world, and coincidences started happening a little too often. 6 weeks after we started dating, I ended it. We were sitting at a small restaurant in Lincoln Park. I remember staring at the candle between us while choosing my words carefully. "Raymond, this isn't working." His smile faded. "What do you mean?" "You're too intense for me." The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I care about you," he said slowly. "Is that a crime?" "No, but I need space, and you're not giving me any." Silence stretched between us. Then he leaned forward. "You don't mean that." "I do." "Marissa, you're just scared of commitment." "No," I said quietly. "I'm not. We're done." For a moment, he just stared at me. Then that expression appeared, the one I'd see over and over again in the months that followed. That wounded, manipulative look that said he was the victim. "Please don't contact me anymore," I said. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. The messages started the next morning. At first they were apologetic, then romantic, then desperate, then obsessive. Flowers appeared outside my apartment door. Expensive camera lenses I never asked for. Framed photos of us from our 6-week relationship, each gift making my skin crawl more than the last. I blocked his number. He got another one. I blocked that one. He started emailing. New accounts, new phone numbers, new ways to reach me. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, it stopped feeling like persistence and started feeling like something much darker. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, it stopped feeling like persistence and started feeling like something much darker. At first, I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Raymond wasn't threatening me. He wasn't violent. He was just relentless. But relentless has a way of slowly eroding your sense of safety. The first time I truly felt afraid, was during a wildlife shoot in southern Illinois. I had driven nearly 5 hours to Shawnee National Forest to photograph migrating hawks. The trail I was using was remote, miles from the nearest parking lot. I'd told almost no one where I was going, which is why the sound of footsteps behind me made my stomach twist. I turned around, and there he was, Raymond, standing in the middle of the trail with that same unsettling smile. "Oh, hey," he said casually. "Fancy running into you out here." I stared at him. "How did you know I'd be here?" He shrugged. "Lucky guess." But it wasn't a guess. I knew that. And he knew that I knew. After that, the coincidences multiplied. He appeared outside coffee shops where I edited photos, outside my apartment building, outside galleries where my work was displayed, always smiling, always acting like it was accidental. When I told Natalie about it, she didn't hesitate. "Marissa," she said, leaning across the table, her voice serious, "this isn't romantic persistence." "What do you mean?" "This is stalking." The word landed heavily between us. I wanted to reject it, but deep down, I knew she was right. Natalie helped me start documenting everything. Screenshots of texts, photos of unwanted gifts, dates, times, locations, every appearance, every message, every incident. I recorded everything with the same precision I used when documenting animal behavior in the wild. Predators leave patterns. So do people. After 4 months, the pattern was undeniable. I went to the police. Filing for a restraining order was surreal. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and disinfectant. I sat beside my lawyer, Victoria Santos, clutching a folder thick with printed evidence. Raymond sat across the room with his own lawyer. He looked calm, almost confident. When the hearing began, his lawyer stood first. "My client," the man said smoothly, "is guilty of nothing more than loving Miss Lawrence." I felt my hands curl into fists. "She welcomed his attention," the lawyer continued, "accepted his gifts, and now she's punishing him for caring." Victoria stood slowly. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "Miss Lawrence dated this man for 6 weeks. After ending the relationship clearly, she has endured 8 months of unwanted contact, surveillance, and harassment." She placed a thick stack of papers on the judge's desk. "That isn't love," she paused. "That's stalking." Raymond didn't even look embarrassed. He just stared at me, the way a hunter studies prey that has slipped out of reach. The judge granted the restraining order. Raymond was ordered to stay 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace. No contact. No messages. No appearances. If he violated it, he would be arrested. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The silence felt strange at first, but slowly, my life began to return. I took on new photography assignments. I traveled again. And eventually, I started dating someone new. His name was Cameron Hayes. He was a landscape photographer I met during a workshop in Colorado. Where Raymond had been intense and suffocating, Cameron was calm. "Respectful?" he asked before touching my camera gear. He never showed up uninvited. He understood the concept of boundaries, which apparently made him exceptional. For several months, everything felt normal again. Then my mother got involved. My mother, Patricia Lawrence, has always believed that family harmony is the most important thing in the world, which sounds wonderful until you realize what it really means. It means she expects the most reasonable person in any conflict to compromise with the most unreasonable one. When I told her about the restraining order, she didn't react the way Natalie had. She didn't say, "Are you safe?" She didn't say, "That must have been terrifying." Instead, she frowned. "Don't you think that's a little extreme?" she asked. I blinked at her. "He was stalking me. He just has strong feelings for you." "Mom," I said carefully, "he followed me across state lines. But did you make it clear you wanted him to stop?" I stared at her. I told him, "Please don't contact me anymore." "Well, sometimes men need very direct communication." That was my mother. She had spent my entire life reframing other people's bad behavior as misunderstandings. When a boy snapped my bra strap in middle school, she told me he probably liked me. When a manager made inappropriate comments at my first job, she said I shouldn't take it so seriously. And now, She was doing the same thing with a man who had stalked me for 8 months. Eventually, I stopped discussing it with her. I focused on work, focused on Cameron, focused on rebuilding my sense of safety. And for a while, it worked. 6 months passed. Then one Thursday afternoon, everything collapsed. I had spent the morning photographing cranes in Wisconsin. By the time I drove back to Chicago, the sun was already setting. As I pulled into my driveway, something immediately felt wrong. My front door was slightly open. My heart skipped. I grabbed my phone. Maybe I forgot to lock it. Maybe someone broke in. Carefully, I pushed the door open. Hello? Silence. Then voices. From the living room. One of them was unmistakably my mother's. The other? The sound made my blood run cold. Raymond. That's when the moment from the beginning of this story happened. I walked into the living room and saw my mother sitting on my couch, Raymond standing near my photographs. And suddenly the air felt too thin to breathe. Mom, I said slowly, why is he in my house? Marissa, she replied calmly. Just hear him out. I have a restraining order against him. I gave him your spare key. Raymond stepped toward me. Marissa, he said softly, I drove 2 hours to be here. Don't come any closer. I stepped backward toward the door. You're violating a restraining order. My mother stood up quickly. Oh, for heaven's sake, she said. Let's all just calm down. Calm down. Raymond just wants to apologize. He is legally not allowed to be here. You're being dramatic, she said dismissively. He's not dangerous. My chest tightened. You helped him break a court order. Marissa, honey, she said gently, you owe him 5 minutes after what you did to him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Raymond tried again. Your mom understands that we just had a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. If you just listen. No. I raised my phone. Leave my house before I call the police. My mother crossed her arms. She's not going to call the police. She looked at Raymond confidently. She's just upset. I dialed 911. My mother's face drained of color. You're not serious. Raymond's expression hardened instantly. You're really going to do this? He said. Yes, I replied. The dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? My ex-boyfriend is violating a restraining order, I said, backing out of my house onto the porch. And my mother helped him get inside. Within minutes, the flashing lights of a patrol car lit up my street, and that's when things got even worse. The flashing red and blue lights cut across my front windows like warning signals from another world. I stood on the porch shaking, my phone still in my hand, while my mother hovered just behind me, like she still believed this could somehow be talked away. 2 officers stepped out of the patrol car. A tall woman with sharp eyes and a controlled voice introduced herself as Sergeant Hayes. Her partner, Officer Rodriguez, followed close behind, already assessing the house, the open door, the movement inside. Who called? Sergeant Hayes asked. I did, I said immediately. There's an active restraining order against my ex-boyfriend, Raymond Hammond. He's inside my house. My mother gave him a key. Even saying it out loud made it sound unreal. Sergeant Hayes' expression changed almost imperceptibly. Your mother gave him access? Yes. Behind me, my mother made an offended sound. I was trying to help them talk. Sergeant Hayes looked at her, then back at me. Ma'am, stay here. The officers entered the house. I heard low voices. Then Raymond's voice, smooth at first, trying to explain. Then firmer instructions from the officers. Then the metallic click of handcuffs. For one strange, suspended second, I felt nothing. No relief. No triumph. Just a hollow kind of disbelief, because the real shock wasn't that Raymond had violated the restraining order. It was that my mother had opened the door for him. Officer Rodriguez led Raymond outside first. His hands were cuffed behind his back, but somehow he still managed to look wounded rather than ashamed. He turned his head when he saw me. Marissa, he said, his voice tightening. I came here because I love you. My entire body recoiled. Sergeant Hayes stepped between us. Do not speak to her. Raymond's jaw flexed. It's not what she thinks. Her mother said, I said, do not speak to her. My mother rushed forward then, as though Raymond was the person who needed comforting. This is ridiculous, she said. He wasn't hurting anyone. He just wanted to apologize. Sergeant Hayes turned slowly toward her. "Ma'am, did you provide this man with a key to your daughter's residence?" My mother straightened. "Yes, but only so they could talk things through. Are you aware there is an active restraining order prohibiting him from contacting your daughter or coming near her home?" "Well, yes, but honestly, that order was an overreaction. They had a relationship. People say things when they're emotional." The silence that followed was sharp. Then Officer Rodriguez said flatly, "You knowingly helped someone violate a restraining order." My mother blinked. "I was trying to help." "You facilitated unlawful contact," Sergeant Hayes said. "That is very serious." I watched my mother's face change, not into guilt, not into horror for what she had done to me, into outrage at being corrected. "At worst, this is a misunderstanding," she said. "I'm her mother." The words came out with the certainty of someone who believed motherhood was a permanent legal defense. Sergeant Hayes did not look impressed. "Being her mother does not give you the right to endanger her." That sentence hit me harder than I expected, because it was the first time anyone in authority had said the truth so plainly. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had no immediate reply. Raymond was guided toward the patrol car. As he passed me, he looked at me with that familiar expression again, injured, accusing, as though I had betrayed him by refusing to be trapped by his obsession. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. I stared at him. "Yes," I said, "I did." Officer Rodriguez put him in the back seat. Then Sergeant Hayes turned to my mother. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us for questioning regarding your involvement." My mother actually laughed once, a short, disbelieving sound. "You cannot be serious." "We are. I didn't commit a crime." "You help someone under court order gain access to the protected party's home." My mother looked at me then, really looked at me, and what I saw in her face made something cold settle permanently in my chest. She looked betrayed, as if I had done this to her. "I can't believe you're allowing this," she whispered. "Allowing this." Not, "I can't believe this happened." Not, "Marissa, are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry." Just wounded indignation that consequences had arrived. I said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. She was placed in the back of a second patrol car a few minutes later. Watching my mother, Patricia Lawrence, queen of family harmony, defender of good intentions, lifelong minimizer of other people's bad behavior, sit behind police glass with stunned fury on her face was one of the most surreal moments of my life. The cars drove away, and suddenly the street was quiet again, too quiet. I stood in my front yard, arms wrapped around myself, staring at my own front door. My home looked the same white trim, same porch light, same potted fern I kept forgetting to water. But it no longer felt like mine, because Raymond had been inside it, touching my things, breathing my air, standing in the safest place I had, because my mother had decided his feelings mattered more than my fear. I didn't realize I was crying until Natalie's car pulled up 20 minutes later. I had called her after the police left, and she must have driven like a maniac because she was there impossibly fast. She got out, saw my face, and didn't ask a single unnecessary question. She just crossed the yard and wrapped both arms around me. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Are you okay?" I tried to answer, but what came out instead was a broken sound I barely recognized as mine. "She gave him a key," I managed finally. "She let him into my house." Natalie pulled back just enough to look at me. The fury in her eyes was almost startling. "That is insane. She really thought I would sit down and talk to him. She's out of her mind." I laughed once, shakily, because the alternative was collapsing. She kept acting like I was overreacting, even when I called 911. Natalie shook her head in disgust. "Marissa, listen to me. You are not overreacting. What she did was dangerous, illegal, completely unforgivable." The word unforgivable lodged inside me. Because until that night, some part of me had still believed there must be a path back from anything a mother did. An explanation, a repair, a conversation. But standing there, with the adrenaline still burning through my bloodstream, I felt something ripping loose. Not just trust, Something older, more foundational. The childish belief that my mother, however flawed, would never truly put me in danger. Natalie glanced toward the front door. "You're not staying here tonight." I looked at the house, at the dark windows, at the living room where Raymond had stood beside my photographs like he belonged there. "No," I said softly. "I can't." "Then come home with me." I nodded. We went inside together so I could grab a bag. The moment I stepped back across the threshold, nausea rolled through me. Everything looked disturbed, even though almost nothing had been moved. The framed fox print above the mantel, the half-read book on the armchair, the throw blanket folded on the couch where my mother had been calmly drinking tea while my stalker occupied my living room. Natalie stayed close while I packed. Neither of us said much. Some violations are too big for language at first. Cameron came over first thing the next morning. I had told him what happened late the night before, and the look on his face when Natalie opened her apartment door told me he had barely slept. He crossed the room and took my hands carefully, as if I might break. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Thank God." When I explained everything in fuller detail, the spare key, my mother's insistence that Raymond deserved a chance, the police, the arrest, Cameron's expression darkened with a kind of controlled anger I hadn't seen in him before. "Your own mother let him into your house?" She didn't think of it that way. I don't care how she thought of it. His voice was low and steady. "She gave a stalker access to you." Hearing Cameron say it that simply stripped away the last of the confusion. No euphemisms, no softening, no misunderstanding, just the truth. He changed my locks that morning, installed temporary cameras, checked every window twice. And while he worked, I sat at Natalie's kitchen table with a mug of coffee I couldn't drink, finally understanding something I should have learned years earlier. When danger wears the face of family, it is still danger. My mother was released later that evening. I found out because my phone rang. I knew it was her before I even looked at the screen. I almost didn't answer, but some small part of me still hoped, stupidly, desperately, that she would call to apologize. That she would say she hadn't understood the situation, that she was horrified by what had happened. I answered. The first words out of her mouth destroyed that hope. "Do you know how humiliating that was?" I blinked slowly. "What?" "Getting fingerprinted like a criminal," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what that felt like?" For a moment, I couldn't even speak. "You helped my stalker break into my house." "I did no such thing." "You gave him my spare key." "I was trying to help you fix your relationship." The calm certainty in her voice made something inside me go cold. "Mom," I said quietly, "there was a restraining order." Yes, I know about your paperwork." Paperwork. That's what she called a court order designed to protect me. You helped him violate it. He drove 2 hours to apologize. He drove 2 hours to break the law. "You're exaggerating," she said sharply. "Raymond is a nice young man who made a mistake." The room seemed to tilt. "He stalked me for 8 months. He was persistent. Mom, he followed me across state lines." "You should be flattered someone cared that much." The words landed like a slap. "Stop," I said. "What?" "Stop defending him." Silence crackled across the phone line. "What you did," I continued slowly, "was dangerous and illegal. I will never trust you again." That's a very hurtful thing to say. I'm done. "Marissa, I'm your mother." Mothers protect their children. She inhaled sharply. "Lose my number." And then I hung up. My hand trembled as I blocked her contact. She tried again from different numbers. Blocked. She sent messages through relatives. Blocked. She even showed up outside my house once. Cameron answered the door before she could knock twice. I watched from the hallway while he spoke to her calmly but firmly. She left after a few minutes, clearly furious. I installed a full security system the next day. Cameras, motion sensors, a monitored alarm. If someone entered my home again, I would know immediately. The legal consequences unfolded quickly. Raymond was charged with violating the restraining order. Because my mother had helped facilitate the violation, The court took the incident very seriously. He received 6 months in jail, and the judge extended the restraining order to 5 years after his release. My mother faced her own charges. She was convicted of aiding in the violation of a restraining order. Her sentence included 200 hours of community service, a substantial fine, and, ironically, a court-ordered no-contact period with me for 2 years. That part was attached to the restraining order extension. She was furious about it. The family drama began almost immediately. Some relatives called me. Others sent long texts. "You know your mother meant well. She was just trying to help. You're tearing the family apart." I blocked them too. The ones who truly understood stayed. One of them was my Aunt Rachel, my father's older sister. She called me one evening about a week after the arrests. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" "For the fact that you had to learn this lesson the hard way." "What lesson?" "That your mother has always valued peace over safety." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dark window. "You've seen it too?" "Your whole childhood." Her voice was calm but firm. "Every time someone crossed your boundaries, she pushed you to forgive them instead of holding them accountable." Memories flickered through my mind. The boy snapping my bra strap. The inappropriate boss. Dozens of smaller incidents. All minimized. All reframed as misunderstandings. "This time," Rachel said softly, "the stakes were just higher." She was right. And realizing that hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. Cameron stayed beside me through everything. He never once pressured me to forgive my mother. Never once suggested reconciliation. One evening, after another exhausting therapy session, I asked him quietly, "Do you think cutting her off makes me a bad daughter?" He shook his head immediately. "No. It still feels wrong." "Marissa," he said gently, "she helped a man who stalked you get into your home." Hearing the truth spoken out loud grounded me again. "Some things," he continued, "are unforgivable." My therapist, Dr. Sarah Monroe, helped me unpack the rest. "Your mother violated the most fundamental role of a parent," she explained during one session. "Protection. She believed she was helping. That doesn't negate the harm she caused." I stared at the tissue in my hands. "She still doesn't think she did anything wrong." Dr. Monroe nodded thoughtfully. "Some people are so committed to their worldview that acknowledging harm would threaten their entire identity. So she'll never admit it." Possibly not. The realization hurt. But it also clarified something important. My responsibility wasn't to make her understand. My responsibility was to protect myself. 6 months after the incident, I made another major decision. I sold my house. The place felt contaminated. Too many memories. Too much violation. Cameron and I found a quiet home together in a suburb outside Indianapolis. It had tall maple trees in the backyard and a wide porch perfect for summer evenings. We didn't tell extended family the exact address. A few trusted friends knew. That was enough. Starting over felt strange at first, but slowly, the tension that had lived inside my chest for years began to loosen. I poured my energy into photography. The experience changed my work in ways I hadn't expected. I created a gallery series called Boundaries. The photographs focused on animals defending their territory, a wolf pacing the perimeter of its pack's land, a bear clawing deep marks into a tree, an eagle diving to protect its nest. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was honest. The exhibition was my most successful show yet. A few months later, Cameron proposed. It happened during a weekend trip to a vineyard in southern Indiana. Just the two of us. No drama. No audience. Just quiet certainty. We married there the following spring in a small ceremony surrounded by close friends. My mother was not invited. Some relatives refused to attend because of that. Strangely enough, the wedding felt lighter without them. Everyone who stood there that day understood something important. Love means respecting boundaries. Raymond was released from jail 18 months after his arrest. The restraining order remained active. According to his parole requirements, he moved to Arizona. I haven't heard from him since. My mother's no-contact order expired 2 years later. She began sending letters. At first, they arrived once every few months, then more often. Everyone followed the same pattern. She was sorry if I had been hurt. But she had only been trying to help. Surely enough time had passed for forgiveness. None of the letters included the one thing that might have mattered, an acknowledgement that what she did was wrong. I never responded. Silence, I discovered, can be its own kind of boundary. The letters kept coming, not often enough to feel like harassment, but regularly enough to remind me that my mother still believed persistence could eventually wear down resistance. The first few arrived 3 months after the court-ordered no-contact period ended. They were addressed neatly in her familiar handwriting. Inside, the messages were always the same. Marissa, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I know you're angry, but you have to understand I was only trying to help. Every letter framed the story the same way. She meant well. She had good intentions. Surely that should matter more than the consequences. Not once did she write the words, I was wrong. Not once did she acknowledge that giving a stalker access to my home was dangerous. After reading the first few, I stopped opening them immediately. Sometimes I let them sit on my desk for days. Eventually, curiosity would win. I would read them once, then I would shred them. The sound of paper tearing became oddly satisfying. A ritual of closure. One letter arrived on my birthday, 2.5 years after the incident. The envelope was thicker than usual. Inside was a card and several pages of handwriting. I sat at my desk and read it slowly. Marissa, I know you're still upset about what happened, but I hope enough time has passed for you to see things more clearly. Raymond seemed so sincere when he contacted me. He said the two of you had a misunderstanding, and he just wanted the chance to apologize in person. How was I supposed to know he was dangerous? He was always polite to me. I'm your mother. I deserve the opportunity to explain. We're family. That has to count for something. I read the letter twice. Then I carried it quietly to the shredder beside my desk. Cameron found me a few minutes later, standing there, staring at the thin strips of paper in the bin. Another one? He asked gently. I nodded. Same story? Exactly the same. He leaned against the doorway. Do you think she'll ever understand? The question lingered in the air. I thought about it carefully, not emotionally, not angrily, just honestly. No, I said finally. She spent my entire life believing that her intentions matter more than the harm she causes. And that's not going to change. Cameron walked over and wrapped his arms around me. Are you okay with that? I exhaled slowly. I have to be. Because the truth was, I had already grieved the version of my mother I wished existed. The one who would have protected me. The one who would have listened when I said I was scared. The one who would have believed that my safety mattered more than a stranger's feelings. That mother didn't exist. Accepting that had been its own kind of loss. But grief doesn't obligate you to reopen the door to the person who caused it. My life had changed dramatically since the night Raymond stood in my living room. I was 32 now, married to a man who understood the meaning of boundaries, surrounded by friends who respected them. My photography career had grown in ways I never expected. Several of my wildlife series have been featured in National Geographic and Wildlife magazine. I started teaching photography workshops for young photographers, mentoring people who wanted to build careers capturing the natural world. And for the first time in years, my home felt truly safe. Not just physically, emotionally. The past had become something I could look at from a distance, a scar instead of an open wound. Then, last month, I received a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. It arrived late in the evening. 3 short sentences. Your mom is in the hospital. Heart attack. She's asking for you. I read the message once, then again, and waited. I expected guilt to appear, or sadness, or some deep instinct telling me to go. But none of that came. What I felt instead was a kind of quiet exhaustion, like hearing the echo of an old argument you no longer have the energy to continue. Cameron noticed the look on my face. What happened? I handed him my phone. He read the message silently, then looked up. You don't have to go, he said. I nodded slowly. I know. I typed a response to my cousin. I hope she recovers, but I won't be visiting. Please don't contact me about this again. Then I set my phone down. Some people would call that cold, unforgiving. They might say a daughter should always go see her mother in a hospital. But those people didn't live the moment I walked into my living room and saw my stalker standing there, because my own mother had handed him a key. They didn't hear her defend him or watch her refuse responsibility afterward. They didn't spend years rebuilding their sense of safety. Natalie asked me something similar not long ago while we were having coffee. Do you ever miss your mom? I thought about it carefully. I miss the idea of her, I said. What do you mean? I miss having a mother I could trust. Natalie nodded slowly, but that person never really existed. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Do you think you'll ever regret cutting her off? For a moment, my mind drifted back to that afternoon. Walking into my home, seeing Raymond touching my photographs, my mother sitting calmly on the couch as if nothing was wrong. The betrayal, the disbelief, the terror. Then I looked back at the life I had built since then. The quiet house, the supportive people, the boundaries that protected my peace. No, I said, I don't think I will. Some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. Some betrayals can't be repaired. And some relationships, even family ones, simply aren't safe to keep. My mother taught me a very important lesson, just not the one she intended. She taught me that blood doesn't guarantee protection. That family isn't an excuse for putting someone in danger. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away. So I'll ask you something. If your parent gave your stalker the key to your house so the two of you could work things out, would you ever trust them again? I couldn't. And I've never regretted that choice. Because at the end of the day, I chose something my mother never did. My own safety, my own peace. And that's something I will never